calculation, but my understanding is that it does allow for that sort of the general cross-section of what a residential property might look like. So it would almost certainly include allowances for pooled properties and spa pools and so on. Chris?
Yeah, so it's taken on an aggregate level. It's not done on an individual property level. It's sort of like if you've got a town of 10,000 properties, on average you might have this many pools. So it just gives a number for the typical usage of a town rather than a typical usage of a house, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. As a ratepayer who already has a meter and pays through any water that I use over my allocation, initially I was in favour, but I've changed my mind to be against. The majority, if you add up there, are against water meters, if you're on an individual basis. And two, what really put me off water meters at the moment, with the government's Three Waters project, if they take over in November, or we agree for them to take over our water systems, why should we spend ratepayers' money, even in the lead-up period, for them to take over ownership of it? They'll say you still own it, but they have got complete control over it. So I think we should postpone the decision till after we've decided in November what we're going to do. We're told that the new entity will give us a credit for money that was possibly spent on infrastructure. Don't you believe it? They already say we'll pay a percentage of the money you spent back. And I can see us having a debt for water meters, not having any control over them. They're run by Wellington or Christchurch. So at this stage, I think we'd be very foolish to install water meters until we know exactly where we're going.
Thank you, and I'll just ask our CE to comment on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't wish to comment on the merits or otherwise of that position, but it's worth noting that the manner in which we have prepared the LTP is to care for the network as if we were continuing to do that in perpetuity. So we made a decision at the start of this process, given the uncertainties of the reform, the uncertainties of whether we should be involved in any different structure at the end of this year. We made the call that we should prepare the LTP on the basis that we were continuing to care for the network in perpetuity. So the merits of that argument is clearly for Council to resolve, but just so that Council's really clear, it was prepared on the basis that we felt this was the right thing to do by the network, and therefore we should proceed in that manner. So just wanted to put that context around the position that Councillor Wilson is making.
Thank you. Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think why a lot of people are against the installation of water meters may be in the way that it's been sold. To me, it's a bit like when America invaded Iraq because they thought Mr. Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. What we've got is 50% water leaks, which on a significant thing is quite significant. So I think a lot of people have backed on that. I am still in favour of water meters, but I'm a bit like Councillor Wilson in that if we were forced to go into this Three Waters infrastructure type of thing, and if it's going to happen later on this year, if we leave it in the LTP, do we still have to go ahead with it, even though it's being taken over by another structure?
Comment again.
Through Madam Chair, we will proceed to do the work that has been approved in the LTP if it's approved. So you couldn't approve it in the LTP and then expect us not to proceed with the things that are in there. And I liken it to, or think about it in terms of the transition process for the Three Waters. If Council still has the choice, and if Council opts in at the end of the year, then there's a 2-year transition. essentially. So the new water entities are not up and running until 1 July 2024. Even on the 1st July 2024, as the new entity is essentially up and running from however many councils are part of that entity, but I think there's the 24 councils in the South Island. So if it was a South Island entity, there's 24 councils, all of which have asset management plans for all of their schemes, which need to be given effect to. So it's going to take quite some time before a new entity would be developing its own asset management plans and making different choices to the ones that councils might currently be making. So I think you can assume that if it's in this LTP, regardless of whether, particularly over the next 3 to 6 years, regardless of whether we're in the new entity or not, they would still give effect to the plan. The only exception to that, I think, will be where there might be economies of scale around big things like treatment. Just as we're examining the Montaltus situation, there could be examples where it would make sense to do something of a different scale in the new entity. But installing meters in a community wouldn't be that issue. So I think yes, if you approve it, it'll go ahead regardless of whether you opt into the new entity or not. So if you don't want it, don't put it in the LTP, because if you put it in, it's going to happen. Yeah.
Thank you, Hamish. Mayor Brown.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just the usage calculation to get the 50%, up to 50% loss, how much is that per person or per household? What's the figure you use?
Yeah, I actually don't know that number off the top of my head, unfortunately. So our water loss figure that we report is around water consumption per person. I think it's 700 litres per person. That's according to our annual report. So if you take about half of that, that with the number.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So people, from reading the submissions, a lot of people don't want them because they think we're going to charge them for the water, which it's not about that. It's about using the water wisely, not wasting it, which is important today. So my thoughts are, instead of options 1, 2 or 3, option 4, which is install a number of meters, some in Ashburton, some in Rakaia, some in Medfin, perhaps pick a street and do the whole street, pick the worst street if you want, and then monitor the meters that are in on that street and see what the actual loss is, which could inform us going forward whether we need to install them on the whole network to stop the water leakage. I think we haven't got enough information, I don't think, and the community has told us that, to say that we're losing a lot of water. We haven't got the evidence to show us. We're assuming we are with your calculations, and they may be right, but there's no hard data to say that. So installing a portion of meters, not hodgepodge, but in a programmed way, might be a better way to do it in year 1, and put the rest of the meters in year 2 or 3 or 4, and when we get that information, we can either carry on with year 2, 3 or 4, or remove it in our annual plans. I think there's a step we've just missed first.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Cameron.
I think we'd all probably agree with that. I think the main concern is that, and that's I think I read there's only one submitter that supports the charging of water. Most submitters are against charging for water. And we have no warranty or guarantees that the government of the day, whoever that may be, will not change and charge for water. We can't know that. So that's something that I have, and that's one reason why I'm against installing universal wide water. I mean, nobody wants water wastage. That's not what we want. My other thing is there's a lot of confusion from the submitters with regards to the warranties of the water meters. We've heard 4 years or 5 years or 8 years, and I think we've been told here 8 to 10 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the meters themselves, the manufacturer says the battery can last up to 15 years. So we've been conservative and we've said, well, we'll plan for them to last 10 years.
And so can I just ask, And so the battery is the only thing that would probably fail on the meters. Are they pretty fail safe otherwise?
So water meters, generally speaking, they're pretty reliable. They generally run for 10 years. We've got 20-year-old, 30-year-old meters out there in the field, so they do last a long time. It is the battery that is the sort of disposal part here.
And the manufacturer would replace them for you, if you got a good deal. Like the manufacturer will replace them free of charge or install them, or because presumably the personnel costs associated with installing them would be just about as costly, I would imagine, as buying the jolly things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can't speak to the warranty arrangements from the manufacturer. We don't know that yet. We need to investigate that.
Yeah, we would, I think.
If I may, so just to clarify, so one of the big front end costs, as I mentioned before, is actually upgrading our service connections to a manifold. Now, that's part of a typical install now, but we've still got some legacy installations where the Toby box literally was just a valve. The new manifold allows for the meter to be screwed in. So any renewal program is actually based on simply replacing the meter, unscrewing the old one and screwing the new one. So it's fairly low cost.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Wilson, I've got a couple of questions too. One was around that. I had people asking me, do you have to do a big dig to put in a meter on an existing Toby box, or is it just done at the Toby box point?
Yeah, I think I may have mentioned this in the submission summary. So it is quite a limited construction. Obviously, to keep costs down, we don't want to dig up half the footpath if we can avoid it. So a lot of the regulation around opening up the road now, we're trying to limit our liability as much as possible. So it's quite close and proximate to the Toby box.
Thank you. And my other question was, we heard last week from submitters, particularly in the Methven area, about the strap-on meters. Now, we also heard from an expert in the field outside of the deliberations that strap-on meters aren't ideal. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so the farmers in the room will note that strap-on meters is part of their compliance requirements for checking their own metering. And certainly ECAN, I understand, do their compliance testing using a strap-on meter of some type. The difficulty with strap-on meters is that they are only as good as the day you take the reading, and you've got to move around to locations where you can actually get onto a pipe. Typically there's requirements around the access to that pipe. It has to be a certain length of straight pipe in order for it to be accurate. So in the situation we're talking here, it's probably not a practical alternative.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question is, following on from what Mayor Brown said, we've got a number of houses on residential C as well as residential D with meters. Have you tested any consumption on residential C that have got actual meters without charging them, just reading what they're actually using? If you haven't, why not? That'll give us an indication of what the average consumption is on a residential C house. Yeah,
so we did do that exercise a number of years ago on some of our renewal streets. A lot of the difficulty around the process of working out what is typical is trying to get a cross section of the township. And the difficulty at the moment we've got is that we just simply don't have the coverage. It's too small a sample of meters to be able to extrapolate that data out. Notwithstanding that, the Mayor's suggestion around doing a greater sample would certainly get us closer to the mark.
Supplementary. As well as that, have you factored in the running costs? I mean, we're going to have an army to read, to analyse the results, to prove that somebody's got a leakage or not a leakage. What's that going to cost a year to run?
Yeah, so we've made some changes to my team, and there's a role being identified for this to pick up this responsibility going forward. So we're looking to address that through some additional resourcing. It's built into the current budgets.
Could you give us an idea what sort of money you're talking about?
Oh, sorry, I don't have the role itself is actually just the way being sized at the moment. through strategic pay. I don't have that detail in front of me at the moment.
What, there'll be a vehicle, there'll be office staff. You must have some idea. Is it 500,000? Is it 1 million? Or what sort of, just give us an idea.
Well, again, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we're talking existing vehicle fleet, so we're not talking about buying another vehicle. It's existing fleet. And the staff member is simply a restructure within the existing team.
Thanks. Now, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Just reading through all the submissions, there seems to be two types of people. One lot who have had water leaks in the past and think that water meters are a great idea because it saved them, saved all that water. The others don't believe that we've got a 50% water loss coming through. So we've put meters in Mayfield, we've got meters in Mount Somers, and I've heard that that's they've both had 50%, well, it's an average, isn't it? So their losses now would not be as high, is that correct? Or is that data available?
I suppose the poster boy for us is Mayfield. Mayfield, basically, after the interventions of putting in the meters, it was part and parcel with a lot of education around the metering, and giving people the tools and the information to make some good decisions. We managed to halve their consumption on the scheme. And you'll remember at the time, Mayfield was experiencing some serious issues. We were potentially going to lose the bore at the time, and really metering contributed to that recovery.
Can I just ask another question? So if we're looking at an installation over 3 years, have you got an idea of how you're going? I mean, the Mayor just mentioned maybe look at a couple of key areas where there's water losses. Could we do that in the sort of the first year, or did you have a plan to do a blanket approach over all?
Yeah, so the current approach was simply to do a universal rollout, effectively. So it would have just been dividing the town into zones and then sending the work to a contractor to get done.
So the places that will get water meters will not just be Ashburton, Rakaia and Methven. Hines?
Yeah, so Hines is already identified, Chertsy's already identified, and Drumore is already identified. So they were getting meters
anyway.
It's really those other three schemes.
So it's the 9,000 metres are just for Ashburton, Rakaia and Methven. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor Brown.
Yeah, could I suggest we put up on the board the option 4, and I'll leave the percentage of metres blank, and between now and this afternoon the staff might want to come up with that percentage figure, because I don't want to say 10% when it should only be 5 or 15 or whatever. You'll come up with a percentage or even a number to install Rakaia, Ashburton and Methven on a trial basis to confirm the 50% loss, and then push the meters out to year 2 and year 3. Well, they were there anyway, I suppose. Yeah. So if the councillors agree with that.
Right, thank you. We've got 2 more people and then we'll bring this discussion to wrap it up. Councillor Cameron.
Just lost my train of thought. The water meter cost, loan funded 5 million is what's projected, is that correct? And that includes installation and that includes purchasing of the water meters in the 3-year period. So if you average it out, it's a third of that each year. Is that right? Or is it? The Chief Executive mentioned that if we do that, Neil, if we put it in the plan, it's in the plan. Is that correct with the phasing in situation that Neil's proposed? Hamish?
Well, my point is that it was in relation to the Three Waters reform. Yeah. So whatever we propose in the LTP, that is the only plan the new entity has to get started. So the new entity will inevitably pick up the plans that are already in place, other than where there might be some benefit of a different scale solution that wasn't available to individual councils. But in the case of installing meters in a discrete township, then the water entity isn't going to do anything other than pick that work up. They've got no other plan to get started. Over time, they'll make their own call, obviously, on all these matters, but initially, they'll have all the council LTPs, they'll have all the council asset management plans, and that's where they have to start. There's nothing else, no other place they can start.
Okay, I've just got two more quick questions. So the debt servicing on 5 million would be what a year? 1%? What's that? 50,000, isn't it? No. Yeah, 50,000. Hey?
Tony, do you want to answer that question?
What's the debt servicing? 2.25.
Plus you've got principal.
Put your light on, Paul.
So what? Give us a ballpark, because you're paying a third, so you're only debt servicing a third, then you're debt servicing 2/3. So if we look at the end of year 3, we're debt servicing the full 5 million and paying debt principal and debt at 2.25.
Excuse me, Councillor Cameron, you need to talk into your speaker.
Oh, did you hear that, Paul? I was brought up where you look at people when you talk.
You're talking through the chair.
Speaking through the chair.
Through the chair. Yes. Can you please relay my question, Diane?
You can ask the question again.
Paul, can you please advise what is at the end of year 3? How much are we servicing on debt and repayments, please? A ballpark. I'm trying to work out as a percentage on our rates.
I've got the answer to that.
Yeah. After 10 years, 5 plus interest.
Who's going to answer? Paul, Tony, you want to comment first?
Well, I was just going to, sorry, through the chair, I was just going to say in terms of what we talked about in this consultation document, from year 4 when all the loan would be raised, it would cost every connected property $48.60. And then that would diminish each year as the rates.
As a region, I mean, what is it as a region?
That's just at a household rate.
Yeah.
Paul will know the figure.
Yeah.
Paul?
It looks like to be about 600,000 a year. Because if
Two,
you take
2%, isn't it?
well, it's 2.25, which is the interest rate, plus if they've only got a 10-year life, then you're going to have to repay that debt over 10 years because you're going to have to renew them again after 10 years. So it would be about 600,000 a year, plus GST.
So that's basically ballpark 2% on top of rates, isn't it? About 300,000 is 1%, is that correct?
I think it's 400,000 is about 1%. Yeah.
400,000, so 1.5%. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CE.
So there's a cost to us, is my point. It's not just a philosophical position of, whether you because nobody wants water racing down the street and being wasted, but there's actually a financial cost, and there's also a cost in terms of people's uncertainty what's going to be done with those meters, what they're going to be used for in future governments, and as to Stuart's position, what's going to happen with Three Waters. We haven't made a decision. So I think when you put all those things on the table, the decision's pretty clear, I would suggest.
A couple of points, if I may, Madam Chair, more for clarification. The decision to charge for water is actually the local government's decision. So a couple of times I've heard government will do this or government will do that. That's simply not the case in New Zealand at the moment. It is a council decision as to how you might charge for water in conjunction with the community. Secondly, the reform proposal has made it clear through the DIA that debt goes with the assets into any new entity if we opt in. So I don't think it's at all likely, almost certainly won't be the case that a community will be, the council will be left with the debt and not the asset. And secondly, or thirdly, one of the things that I'm trying to keep in mind through all this process is it's actually the same people. So whether it's the council or whether it's something called South Island Water Inc., the people consuming and using the water in their other water services will be charged and paying, whether it's through a council or through directly into a new water entity. So there's a number of ways to look at the reform and how it impacts on council, but in terms of the consumer, it is actually all the same people. So the same people will benefit from leak detection, the same people will have to pay for the manner in which that happens. The people who benefit from any efficiencies will be the same people who will suffer detriment if those efficiencies don't exist. So the community, is at the heart of the water reforms.
Thanks for that, Hamish. Now, Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going on with what Mayor Brown said before, I am fully supportive of us installing 8 to 10% of water meters on a street-by-street basis in the first year. That will then give us a good take on if there are these leaks out there and how bad they are. Then I would believe that the rest of, if there are the leaks and we do find there is a problem, then the rest of the meters can be installed in years 3 and 4, which then gets us beyond what is happening as far as South Island Water or something like that is concerned.
Thank you, Mayor Brown.
I agree 100% with Councillor Flynn, but we haven't dealt with Montalto yet. And I was thinking there's a couple of submitters. Well, one was the chairman of the group up there, whatever he's called. And they suggest filtering each house. I don't know whether they can do that or not, because it's going to become unaffordable for their water up there. Or should we be looking at them joining the group with the other water groups we have? Because there's only 2 that aren't joined. It's Montalto and the Methven Springfield. Yeah. So there's questions there, and we do nothing until we are forced to do something on the Montalto and the Methven Springfield schemes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, but I've just been reminded we've got to keep on the water meters initially, and
Okay.
Montalto will get dealt to.
Thought we finished the water meters.
Councillor Wilson, is yours on
Yes.
water meters?
Yes, my question is, if we do install these water meters and we find that our mains have got a major problem all over town, including Tynwald, which I think we do have in our mains, have we allowed for a few $1 million to fix that, or what's going to happen then? If we find it's not domestic, it's the council's infrastructure.
Yeah, so the O&M budgets or the maintenance budgets have been lifted in consideration of our own leak detection efforts anyway. So we have made an allowance for additional maintenance for the leaks that may be found.
Final word, Councillor Mackay.
Oh, I'm a question, Madam Chair, if I may. The question is to you. My question is, I gather that there might be a few people in the same room on the same track. I just wondered if we could have an indicative to save staff a lot of time and energy.
That's right, thank you, and that's about, I was about to confer with the CE that we do. So we've got 3 options up there on the wall, installation over 3 years, which was the preferred option. Option 2 was all in 1 year, and the option 3 was don't install meters, and Mayor Brown's put another proposal to us. So where should we start with? Well, take your advice, Hamish.
Through Madam Chair, I think given the tenor of the debate, I'd start with option 4, because I think there's some support for that around the table. We will need to calculate the cost of that, of course, because we don't currently have a cost of 10% in year 1 and installation in years 3 and 4 if there's leaks. So there is a little bit of work for us to do, but we understand the sentiment, we understand if that is the will of council, that's what we will do, but we will be doing that without a really accurate sense of the financial impact of that. We'll need to go away and do that work subsequent to an indication now. So I suggest you get an indication.
Yes, I was just going to ask for an indication around the table of how many prefer that we start with option 4. 1, 2, 3.
Just need clarification, if that's okay. So you're saying 10% in year 1, nothing in year 2, and installation in year 3 and 4?
Yeah, to review the 10%, to review the
So why would you not do anything in year 2 then?
Because the results of the work would start to show up, wouldn't it?
I am a little bit confused. Would it be possible, perhaps, if the the Mayor might,
Explain.
I know this is not a formal resolution, but if it were, what might that resolution be?
That we ask the CE to go away, look at doing a trial in year 1 of X amount of water meters to be installed, and for that information to filter back as soon as it can to inform when the water meter should be installed or not.
So what I'm reading is that there is no assumption of anything beyond the trial, and that the council will review the data that comes in from the trial before making any further decisions at a future decision-making moment.
I think we need to, once you've gone away and thought about it, we need to put some money in years, whether it be year 2, 3 or 4, I'm not sure, and work along the assumption that we will install the meters, and if we get the information and we don't need to, we can take it out of the plan, through the annual plan, but it's very hard to put it in the plan if it's not there.
Okay, I'll
Making sense.
we'll do some. I understand the sentiment. We'll do some work and with particularly Paul and Tony as to our obligations, if you like, through this planning process and how easy it is to signal it in that fashion. But we understand the intent of a trial.
Yep.
Yeah.
No.
And
Quick question.
Yeah, as part of that review, it would be good to have an idea of what is an acceptable amount of water loss, so we know, like, we're suggesting 50% is 0%. Are we striving for 0? Like, do we get water meters after 30% or 20% or whatever the standard is in the world?
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Sorry for lateness. Well, not really. I did something else. I go back to option 1, to be quite honest. Why are we not using that? If we do the first year, the trial, and 2 and 3, the installation, so it stays in the budget.
So, Madam Chair, I think that that's a legitimate counter view. But what we're trying to do is get an indication of which option has the majority preference. And I've just suggested that we start with option 4 because there's a sense that that's where the sentiment might be. You can start with option 1 and work your way down to option 4. But if there's 7 or 8 hands up for option 4, then we know the work we need to do. Yours may not be one of them, Councillor Brown, but that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to get a sense of how much support there is for the Mayor's suggestion. That's sort of where we're at. And if it's not conclusive, then we need to have a really thorough debate about the other options to try and get a sense of where council's at.
Okay, so you've all heard now quite clearly what the option 4 is. So just a show of interest, how many people would prefer to see option 4? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Done. And so I guess the next step after that would be to probably revert to option 1, dependent on the outcomes. Would that be right?
With greatest respect, I don't think you could assume that because I don't think we've really thrashed out a priority order of the other 3 options. We kind of jumped to option 4 because of the sense that it might have support, but I don't know where you couldn't then assume that option 1 was the next best if option 4 didn't proceed. But there's a clear majority of councillors who like the idea of option 4, so that's fine. But there's no default position. There's no plan B. That's what we're deciding to do.
It's a tricky one because you can never quite get it right. We think in some people's eyes it is and some it's not. But Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I'd like to state that on option 3, don't install them until we've made up our mind about the new water entity. We're just putting something around our neck and we're not going to get the money back fully, so we're just stupid until the new water entity. Ngāi Tahu want half the management of our waters, so I mean there's a lot of complications to come before it's
Okay, Councillor Cameron, your last
I sort of a little bit aligned with your thinking, Stuart, because I'm a wee bit cynical, but I think we cannot be wasting water. So if we'd have a small trial, as Neil suggested, with very strict parameters, so that we're not automatically going to go to years 2 and 3 and 4 and install all the meters. Like there has to be, a definite signal that we're losing massive amounts of water in order to go there. So that's contrary to your position, Diane, where you think that we will install the meters over 3 years if we...
Questioning that option
Yeah.
doesn't follow.
Oh, I thought you suggested
Thank
that.
you.
I'd be very much against doing that.
Councillor Latham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very much in favour of option 1. I think the staff have measured it as accurately as they can. And no matter what happens, whether we have a new water entity or not, we in the future are going to have to be very accurate in the supply and the monitoring of our water under national policies. And why are we assuming that we're going to be taken over by a new entity? There seems to be an element of fear in the room. Where it may not be. There's a good chance it will be, but it may not be. So I think we should carry on as though we are going to be in control of our water infrastructure in the future. So I'm very much in favour of option 1.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. And I was just going to go back to my previous question about how many other towns have had meters in. So how many water meters are out there in the district already? There must be a lot. Would there be about 1,000 or not that many?
There's several hundred metres out there in the district at the moment. We've got them in Mayfield, we've got them in Mount Somers, and as Andy said earlier, we've got Hines, Drumore and Chertsey in this year, theoretically to put meters in. So we have had experience of meters out there in Mayfield, where obviously it made a big difference, and in Mount Somers, where we've found, again, several leaks there as well.
So if we're doing a trial, it's basically just doing what we've done in the past with those little towns, but we're doing it in the bigger towns, really, isn't it? So it's not doing them all in one whack. So I think option 4 is really kind of option 1 delayed, isn't it? When you think about it.
That's right. Councillor
The distinction is reviewing the data.
Yeah.
So it is, while we might expect to find leaks, and we might expect that there's a delay, we couldn't say that's going to happen until we got the data from those meters and analysed it, and to Councillor Cameron's point, decided what an acceptable level of loss was. Then we can't assume that the rollout will continue.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Just one more question. I've been following this while I wasn't here. That option 4, can someone explain exactly how it's going? We do the testing, and if we find there's a lot of water getting lost, we're not doing anything else because we don't put it in. Is that correct?
No,
Short version?
the intent, as I understand it, would be that we would install, say, 10% of meters. We would examine the data, and if there's an unacceptable loss, we would then be proposing to roll out meters, because we've proved, if you like, the 50% loss. And the conversation started around considering the submissions, where a number of our submitters simply don't accept that there is evidence for the loss, and this would be a way of either proving it or not, that the loss was there.
Yeah, so if we find it, we're carrying on with 2 and 3 with installing. If we think it's unacceptable, the losses.
Yes, and the subtlety of that is that's when we come to another decision point. So you would have to proactively then commit to the balance, because you can't meaningfully review the data in the assumption that you're going to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Lovett?
I was just wondering, I support option 4, but could we add into that, if there is substantial loss found, that we install the meters over the 3 years, so we have it in the plan that if we find it, we can put it in there.
We'll turn our mind to that, because one of the things that, remember, the LTP is a budget. So do we provide for the cost of the meters with a kind of a pause point around the trial, or do we not provide for that and let the trial stand on its own merits, and then have to have an active decision to provide in the event that the trial gives a result that that's what council wants to do.
We still have to have it, I think, there, just have that pause period, but sort of aim, if we have a problem, we have a plan to carry on, and it is in the budget.
Madam Chair, that's where this is difficult, because we don't have the utter clarity of the detail of that option, and it means slightly different things to different people.
That's right, because to me, in my simple mind, we are partially doing option one because we're going to be installing meters anyway. It's just that we're not taking the option of the whole rollout over 3 years. But in actual fact, we're on the journey.
But it might be a short journey, depending on the results.
That's
Could I don't know, I'm looking at Tony, but could I suggest that we adjourn water meters for now, and that we give some thought to a more concrete framing of the idea to try and gauge support for the thing in its total, and we may have something by the end of the day. It might require a further specific get together to try and nail the water meter. So I just think there's a lot of different ideas swirling. It's not unanimous option 4 clearly. And I think, to be fair, all councillors should understand exactly what's being proposed, rather than the subtleties of meaning something slightly different to different people.
So you can do that over the next, it may be by this afternoon, or it may be another day, but you could gather the information and give us what the effects will be.
Well, yes, I think it's going to be really difficult to do that today, clearly, as we do all the other deliberations. But if we have to come back for further deliberations later in the week, if we have to have a special water meter deliberation meeting, that would seem worthwhile, given there's a lot of interest in it in the community. It's one that demands we have utter clarity, I would have thought.
Probably totally acceptable, and might only take 15, 20 minutes, half an hour to do that, but yes. I think it's worth getting information and making an informed decision.
Yes, yep. That's what I'm proposing.
Thank you very much, the wise words. Well, that brings our water meter discussion to a pause at the moment, so thank you all for your inputs and comments. The next topic is the general comments in the LTP. And Tony, I'll hand over to you.
About the Montalto, we didn't discuss that.
Thank you. Through the chair, we're working through the consultation summary booklet quite systematically from this point on. So if I can get you to jump to page 62, then we've got some general comments about the LTP, some general comments around infrastructure, and then we'll drop back into the Three Waters. So from page 62 to 68, this is just people's general feedback that they gave us. There's some staff comments associated. If you've got any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Councillor Cameron, you can lead off.
I don't know if this is what you mean by general comments. I went to a meeting or an event on Sunday and talked to some people on the street, and they're very upset at no rubbish tins at the cemetery. And also lack of rubbish tins in general in the town. Is this the time to bring that up, Tony? I can't see a submission on it, but it was a verbal submission to me, if you like.
Thank you, through the chair. So at this stage, we need to work on the submissions that we've received through the LTP process. We can certainly take a note of that and pass that on to the Open Spaces team with your comment around cemeteries.
So I'm leaving it with you.
Yep, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the comment on the wall is, do elected members wish to make any changes to the draft LTP based on these comments in the general comments? We have silence. So, I guess if they consider it's in the LTP, we can carry on.
If everyone is happy, we can move on. Although, Councillor Mackay.
Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, thank you. Page 66, Environment Canterbury. ADC notes notes that ADC has adopted the work program and is implementing Canterbury Water Management Strategy in wastewater, drinking water and biodiversity. So, apart from clean water for drinking, what other matters concern the Canterbury Water Management Strategy in drinking water?
I don't know the answer to that.
No, I
but,
don't either. That's why I'm asking it.
There's a lot of words there. Obviously, clean water is number one. Anyone else wish to comment? Councillor, or would you like to add to that or not?
I asked a question I don't know. I asked a question that I don't know the answer to.
All right. Well, I think Tony's going to try and answer that.
Sorry, could I just get the question repeated? I think in my head.
Lynette, you'll have to turn your light off, please.
Madam Chair, on page 66 of the document we're working through, submitter name Environment Canterbury, and the wording is notes that ADC has adopted the work program and is implementing the Canterbury Water Management Strategy and wastewater, but I was concerned about drinking water. Apart from advocating for clean drinking water, what else is happening, if anything? Because I don't know the answer to it.
Perhaps I can try briefly. It's a very wide-ranging strategy, and I don't think it is answered simply, but it can be. We can circulate the strategy and give you that an answer to your question at a future forum. All councils have committed to it. So having an understanding of what's in there is fair enough, but it's a broad strategy. So let us give you that advice, but not specifically here.
Thank you.
The Mayoral Forum has supported it and adopted it for a number of years, so they're just really confirming that our council's part of that overall process.
Thank you. Any further questions? Well, Councillor Mackay, have you...
Look, Madam Chair, I totally agree with the Chief Executive, but drinking water pops up there, so I was just wondering why it has, apart from that the strategy is for everyone to have clean drinking water. So I was trying to work out if Environment Canterbury was, under the water management strategy, trying to take over our powers and interests. Maybe I'm being a conspiracy theory on that one, because I know some of the councillors would like to up there.
I think through you, Madam Chair, ECAN is being supportive of this council's endeavours in terms of the CWMS, but the specifics of it we can send to you. I don't think they're trying to take anything over or off us. They're acknowledging our commitment to it and are saying well done.
Thank you, and that was my take too. These are comments and positive comments they've made, and we're not seeing any negativity there. All right. I guess if there's no further comments on that, we can just move through to the comments on infrastructure, which Tony have found on page, or they follow, don't they?
Yes, they do. So from page 68 to 71, these are general comments that we received around different infrastructure and projects. So perhaps we've broken them into sort of categories, for want of a better phrase. So the first one that comes up is the Ashburton Town Centre upgrades.
Silence in the room.
Excellent. Then down on the bottom of page 69, we move into infrastructure upgrades just in general. Through the chair, we have a question here with Councillor Mackay.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 70, the Methven Community Board, the submitter notes that there is growing concern in the Methven community that infrastructure will not be able to handle. That leads on to the real question behind this is, we've been told at Council that we are in the tendering process for tanks. When we tendered for those tanks, water tanks at Methven, was the view of particularly one of the community board members taken into consideration on the type of tank and who may have the proper tank considered in the tender process?
We've gone to great lengths to bring the community board along with us on this journey, but I'm aware there are some dissenting opinions within the board. But at the end of the day, we have an obligation to specify the appropriate infrastructure for this project, and the market will determine what the answer looks like.
And it's obvious from the submissions, everybody certainly believes in, which as we do, and continually working on infrastructure. It's one of our big costs. I think it's just an ongoing program, isn't it? So on the wall, for those who can't see it, we've got the comments on the town centre upgrade, infrastructure, Three Waters review, and informal community feedback. And I must say, in the informal feedback, it was nice to read comments there that some people think that we are actually doing our best and trying to do a good job. You don't get many of those comments. Oh, we moved to the Montalto, which is
Question.
It's in the drinking waters. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, page 71, the submitter was Hines. We've got no community board. How certainly not me. I mean,
Thank you.
How does that sort of line up?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So what happened is through the open days that we had and the community meetings that we attended, we had a lot of conversations with people, and a lot of people asked questions, were interested in a particular aspect. When we encouraged them to make a submission, that's not their cup of tea, but actually they might have raised a good point or something that's valuable to feedback. So this is a first for us, and we've actually captured that informal community feedback into this process. So we won't be able to get back to whoever this person was that we talked to, but it's just sometimes questions have been asked that are valuable for everybody to understand.
So the next topic, there's no questions, is waters. And Mayor Brown, it might be an opportunity for your Montalto comments.
We probably don't do anything with Montalto until we need to do something with Montalto, and it could be years away perhaps, because I think the drinking water standards have got to be changed or enforced or something to push the button up there. I think it's going to be expensive, and should they join the club? Don't know. But it's going to become unaffordable for them if they've got to look after it themselves. And their suggestion of putting a filter on each house is probably a very good suggestion, but I don't think that meets the drinking water standards. I don't think. But
Mr. Guthrie, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so we've been round the garden a few times with Montalto. So some years ago we did some investigations into point of entry treatment systems as a potential solution, and it looked quite favourable from our point of view as an option. When we got into the detail at that point, the Ministry of Health's guidance was pretty limiting. It was pretty much non-existent. Fast forward to now, there is a new exposure draft standard being released, and that is okay. So it's an exposure draft. It's not binding at this point, or it doesn't have any status at this point. It appears to provide for point of entry as an option, but there remains quite a deal of liability on the water supplier regardless. So we would have to look at exactly what that looks like once the document is finalised. But it's certainly, point of entry is still absolutely in the mix if we can find a pathway. But at the moment we are also pursuing some other options around this combined plant as well.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, to a district like Ashburton, I believe it's most important that we keep our eye on this situation of point of entry, and especially the Ministry of Health standards, because to be quite honest, they don't actually live in the rural areas, the people that will make this whatever it is that they come up with. And it's harder to change it at the end than it is at the beginning. I know Mr Bayfield, who's going to head the new Ministry of Standards up there, is aware of the matter, and I believe that maybe through the mayoral forum or us as councillors should keep our eye on the ball with this one, because it could save an awful lot of water. You're worried about the water, Madam Chair, and 50% wastage in a town, you're going to put a metre on it. You have to remember that our best take on stock water, present stock water take figures, is that we only use 2%. So, let's get real. We've got to find a new way around of delivering clean water to those people in rural areas.
Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Falloon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My thoughts on this are that I agree with the Mayor that we don't need to do anything huge at this stage. Wait and see what the water standards are going to be, then talk to those people, those households in that area, and then it might be that council will do the installation of what the assets are required to give them the water that is up to standard. That can then be financed by a loan to those ratepayers, paid back over a series of years. There is no point at all in treating water of which 90% is going to be drunk by stock.
Thank you, Councillor Falloon, and that was my concern too, was if we invest a terrific lot of money into the point of supply, where the water comes into the system, and 90% of it's going to stock, are we getting best value for what we're doing? Hamish.
Through you, Madam Chair, I wonder whether Andy or Chris can reflect on the comment around changing standards. My understanding is the standards aren't changing, and the standards are in place, and they're not being met at Mont Alto. So we're currently, as the supplier, in breach of those standards. Now, I'm not proposing such an expensive solution that is unaffordable. Equally, it would be interesting for Andy to reflect on the position that council finds itself in as the supplier of water in breach of the current standards. It's not the standards changing is not the issue. We're already in breach. So how do we give effect to our obligations to the supply of water when we're weighing up the essential unaffordability of the proposed solution? It's a rock and hard place to me.
Yeah, if I may. So the Mont Alto scheme is currently on a permanent boiled water notice. So that sort of speaks volumes as to the situation we find ourselves. And that is the only way we can be technically compliant, but it's not a particularly satisfactory solution going forward. The difficulty with point of entry treatment systems, and certainly the way it's couched in the exposure draft, is that the water supplier is still responsible for providing that raw water quality at a suitable level, a suitable standard. the water supplier is still responsible for operation and maintenance of each of those individual treatment systems. And then if we have an event on Mont Alto, which we obviously do during wet weather events, it's more than likely that that event will overwhelm those individual treatment systems en masse. So we ended up, instead of having a single plant that can't cope, we potentially end up with 30 or 40 or 50 plants that can't cope and having to run around and respond. So we're still looking and watching very carefully the direction of travel for the point of entry standard or guidance. But at the moment, we're also mindful that it could be just as difficult.
Thank you. Councillor Lovett.
I was just going to make a comment. I know those filters are at the house about $5,000 or $6,000, and you've got to change your filters regularly too. We've done it on one of our houses on the farm. And I'm just wondering, has there been a survey done in this area to see how many houses there have already put filters at their houses on using this water? Is it still an unknown? Are they just drinking this water as is, or have they gone and done this themselves, put filters on?
I don't recollect us having that information on file. So many properties will almost certainly have done something on site, but I don't know the exact numbers.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew, okay, we're not up to standard, but is it still drinkable? Or if I drink it, I will fall over and that's it? Or how bad is it?
That's a difficult question. I mean, for the majority of the time, the water supply it's going through our treatment plant, so it's receiving UV treatment and it's receiving chlorination. The difficulty we have is that it only takes a very minor wet weather event, and that will supersede the capacity of the treatment plant to treat that water. And because of the remoteness of the site and the complexities around responding to that, the only viable way of ensuring compliance for us as a water supplier is through the issue of a boil water notice, a permanent notice.
Happy, thank you. So that leads us nicely into water upgrades, water quality. Tony?
Thank you, through the chair. So, on the basis of the discussion, do you want us to leave the Mont Alto and Methven Springfield plans as they currently are drafted in the LTP, or not? And if not, what's the alternative?
Just jog your memories of what you've got them in, where they are in the plan at the moment.
We've got the investigation work over year 1, and then this work kicks in from year 2. From year 2 over to year 3.
What are you going to investigate at this stage?
So the investigation is in around the super scheme, with the investigation cut right now is around the super scheme. We've got it budgeted into year 2 as an actual project in terms of at Mont Alto, but that would depend on the results from the super scheme. Chris is just pulling out the works program. Sorry? Year 3 for Mont Alto? Yeah, sorry, design year 1.
Design year 2, construction year 3.
Sorry. Design year 2, construction year 3.
So what are you designing in year 1? Designing what?
So sorry, design year 2 and construction year 3. And right now there's the investigation into the super scheme up in that top area of the district.
Push it out. Push it out a few
Thank you, Mayor
years.
Brown. Oh, sorry, you've been answered. Councillor Falloon.
Yeah, just because we've got it in the LTP, if circumstances change, we don't necessarily have to spend it, do we?
Who's going to answer that?
Through the chair, no. If circumstances do change, then you are free to make whatever subsequent decision as a result of whatever information you have. With the conversation we've had with Methven, Springfield and Montalto, we've said this is looking worst case scenario, and that is why we got the submissions that we did, because we wanted people to really understand that it isn't looking simple and easy up there. But council all of the time will be able to make whatever decision it sees fit based on the best information. But by having it in the LTP, at least it is in there as a project.
Councillor Mackay?
Madam Chair, we have to leave it in because our options may change, but if we have no budget, we can't investigate a damn thing. Methven Springfield, I lived on that. That was a beautiful water supply. I'll tell you what, Madam Chair, it was an awful lot better than having to clean out the bird dirt from the drinking water tank that come off the roof.
Rainwater.
We had to do that about every 2 years, and I can remember bathing in and drinking Mount Harding Creek water. In those days, it did come from a spring at Mount Harding property, but now it's actually quite clean now. It's got a bit of most of it's Ashburton River water. It actually looks cleaner and better. And I have to say, with the cropping that happens up there, there's less dead sheep in it. So maybe that's why I've got so broader shoulders. This is the water I was brought up on. But we do have to continue to upgrade the water in rural areas because to meet people have the right there to have clean water in the future. And whatever system comes in, so we have to leave it in our long term in the long term plan.
Thank you. And before I go to Councillor Braham, I make the comment, I think most of us around the table grew up on race water and it didn't do us any harm. Lane.
You're still all alive, so what are we worrying about, is it? I think we should keep it in, because we talked about a super scheme with those people up there. We have to go forward. Just leave it in. It's in the budget. If you use it, use it. If not,
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, I agree as well, but can you point me, I'm looking through the consultation document, I thought there was a table with the percentage increase for the rates in the document, but I can't find it at all. Was it there, because it was it was 100 and something % increase, wasn't it?
Through the chair, yes it is quite a significant increase. I wonder if you're thinking of the letter that we sent directly to those connected to the Methven and Springfield and Montalto suppliers, because that outlined the full tables.
Oh, okay.
That showed what was going to happen over the 10-year plan.
I've seen a table somewhere with the amounts on, and there's not much in the consultation document about it, but I think we need to keep it in as well, and just as a safeguard.
Thank you. Any other comments on the other water grades? Upgrade pages, there's 73, 74. I see there was a comment there that from a Methven gentleman that our reservoir was earthquake damaged, but the staff comment was it's not damaged by the earthquakes, but post-earthquake seismic assessments did identify it would be susceptible in the future. Councillor Lovett.
Oh, that was my question, because there's been a lot of comments about the water tanks at Methven and the cost of the new one. I said, how can we kind of get that message through that we have done our homework and what we're doing is right to kind of counteract with what's going on?
Mr. Guthrie?
I said it earlier. We did a lot of work particularly with the Methven Community Board, and we had a number of meetings upwards of 12 months ago, I believe, and follow-up meetings with board members. So I'm not sure how much more we can do on that front.
Thank you. So water quality is the next topic. Comes in on page 75.
I've just got a quick question.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I see there that one submitter has always boiled their water in Methven. We haven't had a boil water notice for quite a while, I thought. There was probably a period of 2 years where we had quite frequent boil water notices, but we wouldn't have had one, or even Mount Somers probably wouldn't have had one for a good year or so. Would that be correct? Yeah, so that is going to be something that the boil water notices is going to be something, a thing of the past, hopefully, going forward.
I would hazard to say that the only reason we haven't had boiled water notices on those schemes is we haven't had the weather to drive it. Unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say that, but I think we are just blessed by a good run of weather at the moment. He said, touching some wood.
Me too.
Yeah, so unfortunately we haven't made any substantial changes to those plants in the ensuing years that would necessarily have addressed this issue. It's still a fundamental issue with compliance.
Okay.
Councillor Cameron.
We had a submitter talking about the water quality in the northeast of the town last week, and it appears that there is a problem out there. What, Andy, do we have in the plan to deal with that?
Yeah, so we're proposing a different tack with the northeast area. Previously, we haven't done a lot of work in terms of design without knowing that there was an acceptance by the community that they want the service. What we're proposing in this plan is to commit to the detailed design of all of those locations, those streets, have a design in the drawer, and then we will be better equipped to respond on a street-by-street basis to individual extensions. But again, the extension would still be subject to sufficient community support.
What is the trigger point for that?
The majority, well, from our point of view, we need to know that there's a reasonable chance that the proposal is going to have success. So, because it takes quite a bit of staff time to manage these processes. So we have to be satisfied that it's just not one landowner wanting something. If we had sufficient success, then we will then pull the plan out of the drawer, do some current pricing, and then communicate with the affected group. As far as council's or the officer's recommendation, it will depend on the likely return on how quickly the take-up would be. So typically, you might have half the people prepared to pay at the start of the project. How long will council have to be a banker for the capital cost before it'll get its money back? And if that looks like it's going to be within a few years, then typically council has accepted that risk and proceeded with the project. But it really is on a case-by-case basis.
So can I just ask one more question, a wee bit more general? Under the drinking water standards, what is the council's obligation to the northeast with their water quality, given that they've all got their own bores and things? But do we have an obligation under new drinking water standards to ensure that that is of a decent quality?
No, they're considered to be self-suppliers.
Okay.
So it's their responsibility. You will have noted council has spent quite a bit of time in recent years reminding those landowners of their own responsibilities and, encouraging them to get their water tested and so on and so forth. So currently that's the way it lies.
Thank you. And we did have at least 5 people from that northeast corner requesting that we look at reticulated water, and as one said, always the problem's going to be some have just had to deepen their well because it went dry, so there's always going to be some that will and some that won't. Councillor Mackay.
So is it staying in? Is it staying in the long-term plan?
The design?
Yes.
We've not heard that we should take the design out.
Good. Can we also, I know we do a lot of work out there, but the residents change quite frequently out there. And some of them are only just finding out the latest results, because I think only 1 or 2 people have actually only tested their wells, but the Bush Telegraph's moving rather quickly, and yet they've gone and put in new wells this year, most of them. Can we please keep the design going? Because they will come back, and can they be reminded of the process? Because some of them I speak to out there come and see me, they don't actually know the process. They just write a letter to council. If they get enough people to write a letter to council, they then get their street on, especially if they get to 60%. That's a good number for council to start at. They get it.
Thank you.
But some of them just don't know that. Even some of the more informed ones that come here and submit it didn't know that at the start.
Correct, and I have often wondered how do we keep those people up to date other than through the media as to what our plans are, because there'll always be some who say they don't know. Councillor Lovett.
I would say we've got to keep plugging on there, but one of my biggest concerns is there any studies being done with all these houses out there with septic tanks versus water? Because there must get to a stage where septic tanks going to interfere with the drinking water and they just keep going down. Is it an area that, as a council, we kind of need to start monitoring and try and get all these people on board, all for services?
Yeah, so a lot of that work is really in Environment Canterbury's wheelhouse. They certainly do a lot of work. The northeast has particular issues associated with some fairly substantial consent holders, discharge consent holders, and there's a lot of work happening around that as well. So I'm aware that information is ongoing, or that investigation work is ongoing, and certainly Environment Canterbury do have a fairly active communication plan around that.
Thank you, Mayor Brown.
Yeah, what year is that planning in for planning down Smithfield Road, or the northeast?
So, as per the comment, staff comment on page 76, that current planning is for year 1 for the detailed design. The installation is scheduled out for year 4, but as Andy's noted, it could be brought forward to year 2 based on demand.
So we've had there's four submitters there, 5 submitters, or 4 down for Smithfield Road. Should we bring it to year 2 because they've asked for it through this process? And we also looking at, and the one submitter told us that it's residential C there now, which means you can subdivide down to 400 or whatever it is. Should we be looking at sewer down there as well?
Certainly, I'm sure the team will be all over that. We've just made a note that we've heard from these submitters, but we should actually do a blanket cover conversation with all those residents out there and let them know what we've got planned, and that might help to generate people to understand the process and to let us know what they would be interested in doing.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We should keep it in the plan, and I like Tony's suggestion. We should encourage the residents out there to be aware and to take advantage of what's known as town water supply. We should reticulate the water out there. It increases the value of their properties quite dramatically if they know there's a reliable water supply and it's there all the time. So I would leave it in, and I would encourage staff to approach all that area out there and let them know what we are planning, because I think it's absolutely vital to make sure we've got the right water in those little rural areas.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
The effluent irrigation, is that monitored by ECAN? Who monitor the effluent irrigation? So that would be maxed out at the most they can possibly put on it?
I couldn't possibly comment. No.
Are you talking about a particular area?
At the northwest, you know, the E. coli and that with all the... Just a remark, one of the submitters was saying.
Thank you. Councillor Falloon.
Thank you. Whilst we're planning on upgrading the town water supply to that area, should we not be doing also at the same time planning for a wastewater extension, particularly for those areas, because I presume wastewater and drinking water pipes can go in the same ditch.
Yeah, so the wastewater and water pipelines, there are actually some separation requirements around the trenching. So sometimes they aren't in the same trench. Also, if it was a gravity pipeline, then if the wastewater was a gravity pipeline, it may be a lot deeper than the water pipeline necessarily. When the submission came in for wastewater in this area, I did have it in my mind that there is an item in the later parts of the plan to do wastewater investigations in that Tarangi block, and it wouldn't be a big stretch to include that area as part of that investigation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, I've not long read the consent a few months ago in that area. In answer to Councillor Cameron, the company does all the tests and supplies all data as and when required to Environment Canterbury. There, at that point, it does become public knowledge if someone knows how to search the place properly or ask the right question to the right person up there. But in the meantime, some neighbours have done their own investigations and found this is why they put a submission in.
So I don't get a feel for the...
And I would back up the Netherby situation, because when you drive down that area, there's going to be this massive development about to take off.
I need to bring it up.
The subdivisions, etc., etc., etc.
Thank you for your comments. There'll be some ongoing work there by the staff comments. The next topic was...
Did we finish that topic? We were going to bring it forward to year 2 as per the Mayor's suggestion. Have we finished that topic?
It's
I
in
thought it was in year
Design
1
is
and
in
year
year
4.
one.
design and reticulation in the northeast is in year 1 of the LTP.
But didn't we have an implementation in year 4 or something? We're going to bring that down to year 2?
It says it could be brought forward based
Okay.
on the interest and
We
the
don't have
need
to
from year 2.
discuss that any. That's enough for you, is that, Tony?
With it having it in the plan in year 4, once we've got the information out of year 1, then there can be a conversation with council to choose to bring it forward to year 2 at that
Okay,
time if
thank
there's
you.
the demand. Yes.
Thank you.
So I have a question, Madam Chair. Yes, we've decided we're going to do the investigations. So after that, I'm hearing that some councillors just want to put the system in. What happened to our policy that we only put the system in when there is community wanting it in there? In other words, the petition, the names on a piece of paper. Which system do they want, Madam Chair? It's option 1 and option 2 in my mind from what I'm hearing. So are we going to change the policy on who wants drinking water out there? We're just going to put it in and charge them, or are we going to wait for them to come in? I'm happy we do the investigation and wait for them to come in at their pleasure.
That's what we are currently working towards. There's no concrete plans to start digging trenches. We may proactively assess community demand to get an accurate feel for what the community wants, but without that at the moment we're just getting the design ready.
Thank you. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just agree with the Chief Executive and Councillor Mackay. Look, wait until the residents want it, but we should take action to encourage them or introduce them to the advantages of actually having a reticulated water supply. Don't just sit on our hands and wait till somebody comes along. I think we should be actively supporting it.
Thank you. Happy? Now, the next comment there is the Mount Somers water supply, which is, there's one comment there on page 76. Yeah. Should we just read it for... Any comment? It was just the one submission there from the Citizens Association up there that the Mount Somers Town Supply has allowed spring 1.2 k's from the present gallery on the other side of Stony Creek. And the submitter wasn't convinced that this is not a goer. So I guess they're looking at an alternative source, perhaps. We have answered it. It was just it came up on the board. Just a comment. No comment around that?
It's not really an LTP issue, is it?
It's important to those who live up there. Okay, the next thing is extra versus ordinary water users, which is also on page 77. A couple of comments there.
I've just got a question on that, if that's okay.
Yep.
Were the residential D properties who have just had their water meters installed, I know there's been quite a few up in Methven, and I think it was timed around the time when the Methven ratepayers had their meeting, but they were sent letters and advised what was happening. There seemed to be quite a bit of confusion about the whole thing, and I was just wondering how the communication methods because I think that's why you've had these submissions come through. People just aren't clear what it means and why.
I think the probably the confusion was a bit unfortunate, and I think just a matter of timing. So many people would have been the residential D properties would have been getting that letter potentially about the same time as receiving a consultation document. And the consultation document was saying that we weren't going to charge for water, and unfortunately the letter, quite correctly, suggested that they would be. So it's that whole distinction around ordinary use versus extraordinary use.
Thank you. And the next comment on the board is about fluoride, of which we had three submitters all opposed to fluoride in our water. And the final comment for this session is around water saving methods. Which two people submitted. One wanting us to consider rainwater harvesting, and the other comment suggests if water shortage becomes a problem to consider recycled water like other cities. And I know I learned in Adelaide that all stormwater is recycled and used for repurposed for commercial use. So if there's no comments on that note, well, we have a comment. Mayor Brown first.
So what is the process for enforcing or regulating to put water-saving devices in new houses? Is there a process? What is the process?
Defer that question to our water experts.
I think we start crossing into boundaries of the building code. I'm aware, so council was involved in a subdivision down Jeff Gearing some years back, and we were able to put some constraint around what was required in that subdivision, presumably through some sort of consent notice on the title or whatever the mechanism is. So I think, unfortunately, it's a bit of a difficult area because my understanding is you can't ask for something more stringent than the building code. Perhaps Jane might be able to help.
It's not on. No, the Greek lights go, but it's just warming up.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, this same question comes up in submissions to be considered this afternoon, but the short answer is there is no requirement under the building code to provide that. So that's up to individual owners. I'll turn it off now.
Liz, could you turn that? Oh, right. Mayor Brown.
Yeah, I think that's their point. It's up to individual owners, but moving on from that, could it become a requirement, and how does it become a requirement? Where does it need to change is the question.
Okay, the answer to that is national legislation. You would need to lobby the government, MB, for changes through the Building Act.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, ECAN can enforce it. Our subdivision on Tarbottons Road in Residential D had to have a tank to take all the water off the roof, and we were allowed a 25 mil pipe into a soak pit. So that was part of the building code. So I think since then they've all started enthusiastically. I think they've abandoned it. ECAN's abandoned it.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, and water saving. I've been doing it for the last 16 years on the block I'm at with a big workshop, and I thought it would be working. Well, I can tell you, the last couple of years, the 33,000 litres came out of the ground.
Tank's dry. Okay, well, thank you all for the comments and good discussions in this session. We break for morning tea now. We're supposed to be back in 7 minutes. I'm not sure whether that can be extended or not. Probably not. Everybody's present. Right, we're back from our little break. Back from our break, and the next topic on the board is wastewater, which can be found on page 78 of the submission summary. Start with Councillor Lovett.
I'm just going to the one on the Ocean View Farm, wondering whether we could have a look at alternatives to the subsurface drip irrigation, because these days we have like an example of a pivot or a lateral that all the dairy farmers are using to put their effluent through, and it's most effective, and I'm wondering whether we should be going forward looking at that.
Mr Guthrie.
Well, we're in your hands, councillors. At the moment, we have this sort of direction of travel at the moment that we're exploring subsurface drip. But at the end of the day, if council want us to do something else other than that, we can respond accordingly.
Mayor Brown.
We should look at all options, not narrow down to subsurface drip. I'm not sure whether it's proven that it works or it doesn't block up, or I don't know, but obviously your trial will show that. I know it's not cheap. You've got the sprinklers in there and they've turned out to be not adequate, obviously. Was mentioned when they first went in, but the councillors weren't listened to then. The consultants were listened to, and so quite rightly, and they put them in, but now 15 years later we're looking at doing something else. So I think we need to explore all the options, and we do know that these travelling irrigators from above do work. Yeah, so look at all options.
Thank you. Councillor Floon.
Certainly support the Mayor on that one, because to me we should be looking at all options on a cost-benefit basis, but certainly one of those options we need to be looking at is pivots.
Councillor Brown.
If I can make a question or ask a question, I thought wastewater from towns or cities can't be done by air. Is that correct? It has to be going in the ground?
Almost certainly our consents will have requirements around aerosols, but at the end of the day, if we're doing an investigation of different systems, we would have to address that matter as part of it. That would obviously be part of the selection criteria.
So how should we look at that? Let's continue with what they're doing at the moment.
Through you, Madam Chair, is there a desire to do a wider investigation, or are we just doing this subsurface drip? We're trying to get a sense of where council's at on these things.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
What can someone just explain the mechanics of a subsurface drip for me? What does that mean? Below the surface, presumably.
It's an idiot that lives in a hole. Yeah.
Took me a while to pick it up.
Okay, so subsurface drip is, it is effectively an underground distribution network, very small diameter pipework, which allows wastewater to drip through the network and discharge to that soil zone. So the plant take up is below ground and via the root system, as opposed to direct irrigation onto the surface of the plants.
So how does that reduce contamination then in the waterways if it goes underground as opposed to on top?
Oh, well, in terms of the solution, it's equivalent. The issue that what you're trying to do is balance everything. The main impediment around subsurface drip for wastewater is that it has to be of a fairly good standard before it can actually go through the system without blocking up the reticulation. And the pilot that we're doing is actually of the filtration technology. So at this stage we haven't piloted subsurface drip, we're piloting some fairly cutting-edge filtration equipment, which up until COVID was looking really, really favourable. But unfortunately, our second round of trials got interrupted by the COVID outbreak.
Because presumably, if you were doing it for a pivot, if you had underground, it's going to cost more to de-block and maintain it and all this.
Yeah, and hence why the important part of that solution was the filtration.
So, as a summary question, if you had subsurface, it appears the main benefit is it's more efficiently taken up by plants, so you get better growth.
Yeah, so one of the principal benefits for the ocean farm was that subsurface drip potentially would be a route to make the standing grass more valuable, because it hasn't had wastewater effluent
Tipped on it.
directly applied to it, which would potentially open up markets for that.
But it would do nothing for our underground waterways or nitrates or coli or anything.
Well, again, it would have to be
leaching.
done in accordance with our consent, which dictates how much we can, discharge to ground. So ultimately, it would be threading your way through the consent and coming up with a solution which is compatible with what we're trying to do.
With what's acceptable in the modern world with regards to nitrogen and...
We are discharging to land now.
Yeah.
The only difference is, in this particular case, we'll be discharging it to the below 6 inches of the soil matrix.
Yeah, I'm not...
Thank you. And before I go to Councillor Brum, my question is, the trials have resumed. You made a comment that due to COVID it was interrupted and subsequent restrictions, but are we back on track with our trial?
I'm not aware of where the trial is at. My understanding is there's still some restriction around that continuing at this point.
Can I ask why?
I don't know the detail to that, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's half my questions gone. So you're doing well as the Chair. Another question. Septic tanks, they've got drip lines as well. ECAN tells us we have to put them on the ground. So I'm aware...
Overground?
In the ground.
Underground.
In underground. So it will be interesting what you come up with.
Thank you, Mayor Brown.
Yeah, Rakai has a pivot for distributing its effluent. It seems to work. The grass there is of higher value than ocean farms, so I think it should be in a mix. And whether it's a pivot or a lateral, or there's many overhead ways of distributing it. So I think they should be investigated in this. And I'm sure somewhere in the building there's a plan that Councillor Ledley did when he was a councillor. If he's probably still got it, for pivoting that whole farm. Was given to the operations manager of the day.
I believe it was signed the cardboard consultant because it was on a sheet of cardboard. I have seen the plan.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Sorry, I was just asking a question at the table. So the trials, obviously we've got that in there and it's in our budget. And I was really just asking the CE if there was request for change, how would we handle that? I'll go to Hamish before.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, the way I heard Andy describe the trial was that it was a filtration trial, essentially, and that would lend itself then to a range of different outcomes or treatments, as opposed to the subsurface drip on its own. So it seemed to me from the debate that the filtration trial should proceed, and there's nothing further to change or amend in relation to the LTP until we get the results of that to then come for a decision as to what that means for the disposal. Have I got that right, Andy? Not quite.
Oh, well, the only thing I'd like to add is that by its nature, the subsurface drip requires a lot cleaner effluent. Certainly going a different application method may negate the need for that level of filtration.
Thank you. Councillor Lovett.
I was gonna ask, why can't we do just do some homework on electoral or a pivot in relation to this trial, because it needs to be noted in a long-term plan. Otherwise, this could just carry on, and it becomes sneaks in, and it becomes normal, and we can't kind of change it. Because we were asking this same question several years last term of council about work being done on alternatives, and everyone seemed to be hell bent on doing this underground stuff, and we know it's costly to do, and it's overhead's far more effective. Where these underground sprinklers, if you look at an overview photo of Ocean Farm, all you see is all these green circles. And I think one day ECAN might pull us up on that, because you're concentrating in little circle areas, and where we know that the other type of irrigation absolutely works. And I know Hamner, when we're up there, we're looking at a piece of land they were looking at putting overhead sprinklers on for their sewage at the time, several years ago. So I actually think we need to make note in a long-term plan that we're going to investigate alternatives, cost-wise and everything.
I'll just let
So-
CE comment on that.
So through Madam Chair, well, that's the direction we need from council then. So we've heard one or two comments, but one of the hard things in these sort of discussions is we hear one or two comments. We don't know if that's the will of council, unless we can, get a strong sense that that it's not a filtration trial per se. It's an examination of a different method of effluent disposal. And if that's the will of council, then that's the manner in which we will respond. So again, we might need, some sort of indication from council other than just one or two comments, and then us trying to interpret the will of council from that.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, can I please put an option on the table that we continue with the filtration, and after that trials have been completed, we then investigate the actual application method for wastewater on our Ocean View farm.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Can we put a hands up, Madam Mayor, on that? Can I ask you to put hands up on that option, Madam Chair?
Happy to do that. I was going to wait till we'd had a comment, but happy to ask now. And I would agree with what you said. So show of hands again, please, if you agree with Councillor Mackay. Majority. Thank you. So if staff could note that, please. And Mayor Brown.
Well, my question is, what are you actually trying to achieve down there? What's the goal?
My understanding of the original intent, you'll remember this is a number of years ago under Mr. Iberg's, when he was involved in this area, and he was the one that actually brokered the original arrangements with the American manufacturer. But the ultimate goal was to address the coverage, as Councillor Lovett had mentioned.
Yeah. So if that's the goal you want to achieve, then you must look at surface strip. You must look at overhead irrigation.
Yes.
You must look at all options to achieve your goal, not just narrow down, because you will have already made your decision if you're going to drip, subsurface drip, because there's probably only one option. You're not got a open mind, I would think.
Well, if I may, it was a council. The direction of travel that we are currently on the decision was made by council. So this is not something we've invented necessarily. We're doing council's bidding at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it was around filtration. Because the filtration's right, you may be able to keep using those sprinklers because they won't block up as much if you take the bigger particles out. You're on the right path, it's just getting the ducks in a row.
Thank you. So we've noted the comments, preferences of the show of hands, and I guess at the end of the day, how much research has been done on the overhead option versus what we're doing at the moment? Would science... No, I know we haven't, but could we look at what other areas do? Would that be...
What I understood the will of council to be is that we're going to continue with the filtration trial, And at the end of that, with the data that we have, we will then examine the disposal method. That's what I heard.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Just a remark, it would be good if the goal wasn't how to maximise income from Ocean Farm. It would be good if the goal was also how to maximise income from Ocean Farm, but also how to reduce leaching and nitrogen and coli leaching into our aquifers. Like, I think it needs a dual goal, because we've just seen that, we've just heard and had some people submitted from the northeast on the whole problem they're facing. So I think we need to just not be singly focused on on one goal.
Not many houses east of Ocean Farm.
But we also have to remember too, we have to be compliant with what we're allowed to do, which is where the staff do their work.
Yeah, so if I may, the comment around coverage is first and foremost, it's about providing better compliance through our consent, because if we're distributing the same wastewater over a greater area, then obviously our impact on that land will be less. The issue the reason why council saw favour in subsurface drip as a potential opportunity was of the fact that it, as well as addressing that coverage issue, it provided this dual benefit of potentially raising the sale price, if you like, of the product that is produced.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Just thinking to keep this momentum going, in our activity briefing, should we have a section of this trial to see what's happening? Because we're not hearing anything about it. It's been going for about 3 years now, I think, and we're not hearing much about it. So it might pay to have it in the activity briefings to keep a watching brief on it.
Thank you, and I see a good staff noting that point. Okay, moving along, the next one is stormwater, which is on page 80. Not seeing any lights coming on. Everybody's reading.
I've got a quick question, and is it now just from the informal community feedback, but about stormwater down in Hakatiri? So is there anything? What's happened?
That again.
No, it's not working. The Hakatiri comment on the top of page 81 about stormwater, what's in the pipeline for that area?
As far as stormwater reticulation goes, we don't have a scheme down in Hakatiri. I'm assuming that would be more informal drainage function through the road, the transport corridor perhaps. So we'd have to do some more work just to find out where that actually lies.
Okay, there's no further comments there. We'll move to stockwater, which is on page 81. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just note one submitter there has suggested that the stockwater race system should be shut down within the next 10 years. Do we actually have a long-term plan for stockwater expansion or retraction or whatnot, or is it just on a case-by-case basis?
I think Mr Guthrie's going to answer that question.
Yeah, so through the stockwater network forms part of the surface water network and is covered by the surface water strategy. Certainly the intention was to facilitate closures where appropriate, and we've got an SOP which describes how we go about closing races and the factors we would consider. We don't have an overall blueprint for closure because at the moment we don't have an overall readily available solution in all places. It'd be worth noting that we're doing trials of stock water provision via the irrigation companies, Ashburton and Lindhurst. My understanding is that the early indications are that that is a successful trial. And one of the once council makes a formal decision about provision of stock water through the Ashburton Lindhurst scheme, then we can look seriously at creating a blueprint for closures in that area as a solution, because we've got an alternative identified.
Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, I've got a comment on a staff comment, and I hope no offence is taken. It reads, "It is now part of our normal practice to consult with Maura Whenua over stock water matters via Aoraki Environmental Consultancy." Madam Chair, I asked a direct question. I remember it that day. I asked them straight out, do you want the water in the river or in stock waters? And they said in the river. So why is that not in the staff comment? Because that will form the reply to them. So why is it not there? That we thank them for their comments, we have listened to them, because this staff comment and what they mentioned there in the summary does not listen to what they said at all, in my considered opinion, and that's also backed up the same with Fish and Game. Have asked for similar. So we've got the two pretty lead agencies in public opinion asking for the same thing, and yet we haven't listened. On this page 82, we have not listened.
Through Madam Chair, if I may, we consult AEC and their submission to this long-term plan included comments about a range of factors in terms of individual water races. So while their overarching preference might be for the water to remain in the river, they also acknowledged the difficulty in some instances where there were biodiversity values. There was a range of other benefits, including drainage, etc., etc. And I remember the submitter commenting on the complex nature of it. So I don't think it's quite fair to say that there's one blanket statement that needs to be adhered to in each case. Secondly, we consult them. The decision maker is still council, and so the council will be weighing up a whole range of issues, including its own surface water strategy and the alternative supply, as much as simply following the views of the external parties. So we take that into account. We consider their feedback. Remembering that closures are on an individual basis, so we'll get an application to close a particular water race or a particular section of water race where the complexities of that section may be quite specific to that section and not necessarily as simple as just saying AEC want it closed to leave the water in the river. So there's a whole range of issues taken into account. I think we do listen carefully to AEC around individual stock water closure applications, but it's way more complex than just a simple position.
Thank you for your reply. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember the ECAN councillor from our district here last week telling us that ECAN was rethinking as well regarding water races. So it's like what Hamish said, it's not an easy solution.
Councillor Mackay.
Madam Chair, could someone please point out the point I mentioned before on top of page 83, page 82, and under this heading stock water? Where are those points, the point that I mentioned in here in the summary or in staff comments? Where's the paragraph? Where's the words that mention it? Please help me.
We can include.
I take my point, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Point taken, thank you. Right. The final note on the wall there is fish screens, which I see Environment Canterbury have commented and submitted on fish screens. Anybody wish to make any comments there?
Just one comment.
Yeah, Brad.
Thinking about the biodiversity that's in these water races, if there's little creatures and fish and whatever in them, you put a fish screen on, they're trapped in there and they can't get in there. Is it the right thing to do today? Should they be allowed to go in and out as they wish? Especially if it's for stock water. Irrigation's certainly different because there's an end result with that water and it ends up in a paddock. But these stock water races are just flowing and the fishes live in them. Should they be allowed to enter and leave as they wish?
Mr. Guthrie?
We've actually asked, we have a consultant asking that question in relation to the methane auxiliary intake on the North Ashburton. The question we are asking specifically is that if the methane auxiliary were to remain for ecological purposes, if that was the only water that was in it, was to maintain biodiversity and what have you, would that be sufficient to remove the need for a fish screen on that intake? So we will have an answer we'll have an answer from ECAN on that in due course.
Thank you.
And in fact, through you, Madam Chair, I seem to recall the presenter from Environment Canterbury was sort of reflecting out loud or implying that there was some rethinking around fish screens at ECAN at the moment. And we still have obligations, obviously, to live with the consent conditions we have, but it does appear as if there's some new thinking or emerging thinking or some informal deliberations that ECAN are having on the merits of fish screens in all places. So that's to be applauded, I would have thought.
That's good. All right. No further comments there. I will thank you all for your discussions, and whether we take a minute's break so that we hand over to Councillor Wilson and move into transportation.
Okay, welcome back. Change of personnel. We're now into... Sorry. Welcome back. to the councillors, mayor, the staff, and we've got some people in the audience. Welcome. Transportation. Welcome, Brian, Andy and Tony. Page 83. The first section is people's comments about good, bad or indifferent. Have any councillors got any... I felt the way we should handle this was perhaps the staff will have taken note from each person who've made a submission. They've given answers why we can or can't do what they want, and I think that's the best way to handle it, rather than us discuss each individual road and person's opinion. Though I am pleased to see somebody said we've done a good job on the RDR bridges, but it's the usual story, potholes and dig outs. So if councillor's got any... Lynette.
I was just going to ask, can we charge people for the damage they do on our roads, whether it's the irrigation causing holes on the in the gravel, potholing them, or people upsetting or wrecking the tar? And you often see the contractors roaring through and making a heck of a mess. Can we charge them?
We can fine for an infringement, but I don't think we can actually charge them for the actual work that we do to repair things.
Yes, I know the road department are quite happy to receive snap, send and solves. You've got to send a snap, send and solve. It's no good saying you saw an irrigator on that road. By the time the staff get there, the irrigator's shifted on and nobody can prove it was actually on the road. So the only way to prove it is to send a snap, send and solve in. And then you get the GPS reading. Any more comments about the feedback we've had? Page 84 or 85. Bottom of 85, traffic flow.
Just, Mr Chair, I've just got one question on Jane Tarbottom on 84, and the staff comment is that the traffic volumes are not sufficient to support the activity, which is seal extension. What approximate traffic volumes do you need to support seal extension?
With current policy with the NZTA, it's around the 500 AADT on a particular stretch of road to get close to the benefit cost ratio that we need to get funding for seal extension. Council can do the seal extension themselves through the unsubsidised if they wish.
And the 500 vehicles a day, does that include trucks or does it not matter?
The 500 is the average vehicle numbers regardless of trucks, buses, cars, trailers, whatever.
Be 500 bikes?
I don't think it would be 500 bikes, and, and one thing, I don't think you'd be able to record them.
Councillor Lovett?
Just going to ask, a few people have been asking about a ring road for the future around the town. Whose job is that, like, for 30 years out?
Councillor Lovett, I think when we get to the second bridge, that will be pretty well.
It's just a comment sitting here. I was just... Whose job is it us as a council or somebody else that does that?
From my point of view, NZTA will look after it from the state highway side. If they believe that they require a road to go round of town, they will put it in, but that's at their discretion. Council could form their own road round the town if they so wished, but it would be at their cost.
Councillor Cameron?
The traffic flows, as we all know, are terrible and slow, especially coming from Tynwald to Walnut Ave, West Street. Now, it appears to me, as someone that goes over the bridge often, that the lights at Countdown are a big barrier to the traffic flows. Has there been any work done? Like, have I imagined that? But I've seen a few fender benders between there's a little narrow merging lane beyond the Countdown light before the bridge, and there's always queues there. Can we influence those lights in any way, shape or form?
We've had discussions with NZTA through their knock contractors to see if we can't get some minor changes done at that intersection. Basically, at this point, they feed them back to their NZTA designers, and their designers at this stage are saying that what they've designed is reasonably good.
And also, Lynette made reference to the second bridge. That is disappointing when we have a second bridge come up, when we have an example of NZTA's design process, isn't it? You know, are we to put faith in them with their designing? We have no good example yet. Our town, the traffic flow is abysmal.
No, the traffic flows is a different. The state highway is a different animal altogether to local roads, right? If we want to put a second bridge across the Ashburton River, regardless of where we wanted to do it.
I was using it as an example.
Yes, but the traffic flows on the state highway is not our problem, I'm afraid.
No, I understand that. But we are the ones that have to use it. It's not our problem, but we have to deal with it. So it'd be good if we could influence it in some way, shape or form.
You can, by putting a different bridge somewhere else or a different route somewhere else.
Or altering the phasing of the red, green and orange lights at the Countdown intersection.
You won't have a show of doing that because we're not involved in that area.
Okay, and my final question is, we have a submitter who's been a wee bit foresighted and thought to the future about a commuter train boarding platform. Have we made any provision for that in our future with regards to other modes of transportation?
The short answer to that is no, because we don't think it is practical at this point in time. We don't think the community as a whole would back it. They're struggling even to get enough in the situation from Hamilton to Auckland at this stage.
Yeah,
now, if they can't do it in that area, I cannot see it happening here.
I think the Hamilton to Auckland, the commuter train is slower. I suggested our lights at Countdown, if we had a commuter train from Fraser's Road to Warranties roundabout, it would be quicker.
Councillor Lovett.
I was just going to say, Alistair Argold came in here and he had some really good ideas there, and wondering if any of them are being followed through. And he was talking about the clear line of vision on Park Street, Havelock Street.
Councillor Lovett, we haven't got quite down there yet, that you're a bit ahead of the game at this stage. We're still on traffic flow.
That's in...
The next part is footpaths and walking, cycling. Page 86. Councillor Cameron.
No, I'm going back to the old part. We haven't influenced anything in traffic flow, so why have we got it in the long-term plan if we can't have any impact on it at all?
We're responding to submissions, Councillor, so these views have been expressed to us, but the ability to impact the flow on the state highway is, Mr. Firth is saying, is severely limited.
Mm-hmm.
But we're putting the submissions in front of you to consider.
Footpaths, walking and cycling. Councillor Falloon.
Yeah, coming back to the submitter on the lichen on the footpaths, which during the winter is an absolute bloody hazard. In fact, I don't even walk on the footpaths, I walk on the road. But I see there was a comment the other day that lichen spraying has started. Where is it being done and how much is being done?
I can't answer exactly the where at this particular point in time. I could get that information from our contractors, and I could tell you exactly where they're going and what they're programmed. But basically, we do a lichen spray each year, and it's done on the footpaths that require it. The problem with lichen is that it comes when nobody walks on the footpath, and because it's there, people don't walk on the footpath. So it's a catch-22. That's the trouble with it. If you had a lot more traffic on the footpath, we wouldn't have the lichen in the first place.
Councillor Cameron?
I'm talking about our shared walking and cycling footpaths, and I note, and I can't see it where we're looking now, but I just read earlier today, Cass Street, there's a shared walking cycling footpath. And submitters say it's too narrow, but our response in the staff comments was, well, it's hardly ever used, so it doesn't matter. So they didn't say it doesn't matter, that was the implication. If we're going to do them, we're presumably doing them for growth. I also note Canterbury District Health Board have given feedback that they're disappointed that we haven't got anything in our long-term plan with regards to increasing walking and cycling. There's a bit of a disconnect there. We've got our cycling footpath, which is not too narrow to accommodate increased growth. The CDHB want us to have more walking and cycling, so we're not really meeting the objective of the walking and cycling strategy.
Well, we are, in the sense that we have got a walking and cycling strategy. As part of that walking and cycling strategy, we have 3 or 4 projects going forward that are in the long-term plan. So there is that connect. As far as Cass Street is concerned, the area that you're talking about is the new CBD area. That hasn't come to its completion at this stage because the whole CBD has not been completed. You need to wait until the whole area has been brought in and been used for a period of time so that the locals get to know what is involved, what is going to happen. When people start to walk in Burnett Street around the area that's available as a shared sort of an area for everybody, I think you'll start to see a change in patterns of use, behaviour, etc. And that's what I'm hoping anyway will happen.
Councillor Mayor Brown?
Just a question on Olive Brockenshire's submission about inspections of overhanging and overgrown trees and shrubs along the footpaths. Whose role is it to check that they are not overhanging and get them sorted if they are?
This is a regulatory function and it rests with environmental.
A question for Jane perhaps. Do you have someone who regularly does that?
Oh, I'm really sorry, Neil, I was tuned out. What was the question?
So it's on overhanging vegetation on footpaths. The submitter's got them here about them. So who? Brian's passed the potato to yourself.
Thanks,
the hot
Brian.
one. It's a regulatory
yes,
job. So who? You have someone who goes and regularly checks
We do.
that sort of thing?
Yes, we do. Our enforcement officer does that.
On a, they wander around the streets or do they wait for a call to come in?
It's a bit of both. It's sometimes in response to complaints, but it's often either observed by him when he's out looking or other staff let him know of areas that we need to send a letter out and ask them to trim the trees back.
And or a snap sense of would do the same
It would.
thing.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think the saying is penny for your thoughts, Jane.
But good honesty.
Yeah. Councillor Rollinson?
Thank you. And I keep always going back to this lichen on the footpaths. Where I live, the lichen has been, I'm always being told it's sprayed every year. It has never, ever been gotten rid of. And then, of course, you get autumn, winter, or a little shower, and away it goes green. And over by Terrace View, it's really dangerous. It's thick, and as soon as you've had a bit of rain, it's slippery. And I take your point about people not walking on it, but that's an area where there's not a lot of walkers. But as long as I've lived there, which is 16 and a half years, the lichen spraying has never got rid of the lichen on the footpaths. And I question why. I've always been told, oh yes, it will disappear and come back, but it never ever disappears. So my question is, why do we not check that out more and make it more effective?
Perhaps they're using water.
Well, perhaps we have to ring Mr. Wet and Forget. He's usually got something up his sleeve that can fix everything.
Well, I did that on my own drive and got rid of it. But anyway, it's just something we need to follow up. And I have taken photographs of it, but it just never disappears. My second point was about the shared footpaths, and I take your comment about, Burnett and Tancred will develop, but that one on Cass Street, it just isn't working, where the cyclists and the walkers are to share that widened passageway on the eastern side of Cass Street. So I wait with interest to see what the peer review comes up with.
Yes, we'll wait with interest as well, but you've got the similar thing where they're putting the raised concrete and the seats, etc. in Burnett and Tancred Streets. Now, that is a area that's going to be used for cyclists, it's going to be used for pedestrians, it's going to be used for people on mobility scooters and their chairs, it's going to be used for traffic. The traffic is to go through there at 10k per hour, everybody else can wander around them. Now, these sort of areas are happening all around the country. They're relatively new. You're getting areas in Auckland, you're getting areas in Christchurch where everybody can use them, regardless of whether you're in a car or on your Shanks's pony type of thing. Okay, so it's just that we're a little bit slower catching up, if you like, and I think once we do, once it all gets completed, you'll find that people will start to change their behaviour.
Okay.
That's what we hope.
Councillor Cameron.
This is just a quick follow-on from a feedback we had from a month ago from the community with regards to the pedestrian crossings down on Cass Street. There wasn't they're paved, so they're and we discussed that, and we were going to talk around nowish about subsequent pedestrian crossings and what they were going to be made of, and have we made any provision for people in wheelchairs and walkers and things to use them.
There's a whole barrage of things in amongst that question.
Always is, Brian.
As far as the pedestrian and crossing points and all the rest, we go by the Copton manuals that we have, the guidance from NZTA. We have to build them to those sort of conditions and specifications, etc., and that's what we do. We're a little bit restricted, or there are areas within Ashburton because of its slope in one particular direction, and because buildings generally are nice and flat, you come outside, you can get different crossfalls on the footpath, and that can be awkward for people on mobility scooters and chairs, etc. It's a very hard thing to try and get right in that sense, given the layout that we have.
It wasn't so much the fall or the slope, it was more the paving material I was referring to. Is it going to be smooth so that people can use it, or is it going to be bumpy so that they trouble using it?
Well, it's bumpy in the sense that you've got those yellow...
That's what I mean, the tiling is not good for people crossing the road.
well, the tilings are there for the blind and the mobility impaired, so they know where the crossing point is. So that's the first thing. The second is the actual slope, and we try and get that as flat and as agreeable as we possibly can. Outside of that, we go by the guidelines, I'm afraid, and we can't do much more than that.
Yes, I think Councillor Cameron brought up a good point. Cass Street, where you cross at Moore Street corner, we've got two white lines, and I struck it the other day, people consider it a pedestrian crossing, but it's not a pedestrian crossing. They've got other ways to get across there. Why we got two white lines that look like a pedestrian crossing when they're not?
They're what is known as a pedestrian crossing point, or a crossing point. There's another one going to go in on State Highway 77, just to the west of the New World Car Park entrance. These are at crossing points, and as a crossing point only, you have, as a pedestrian, have to make certain that the way is clear to go across. If you've got the zebra crossings there, the pedestrian crossings, then you have the actual right of way, but I wouldn't say that you should step out in front of a car or anything like that, because it won't stop for you generally in Ashburton. We've had 3-4 traffic audits done of Cass Street and those particular crossings. Each one's come back and said that in their own right, there is nothing wrong with what has been put there. However, it is confusing. And so we're now looking at taking some of the lines away and making it hopefully a little less confusing.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Mackay.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just back to the liking, if I may. When we reply to this submitter, can we put in the environment in which lichen thrives? I've noted that where there's air available to the footpath, where there is sun available to the footpath, there doesn't seem to be any lichen. So I guess like you and where we come from, Mr. Chair, we had to look at the cause of what was causing the problem, and maybe the answer lies there. So I'm wondering if someone is complaining about lichen outside their front gate, maybe they should consider, if it does have influence, the environment that that footpath is in, like is it shaded with trees and bushes? I don't know.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm on page 90, Newman's Tyres.
No, we haven't got there yet.
Oh, are we not there yet? Okay. Well, I'm really fast with 30 k's going through this.
Mr. Mayor.
Just a question on, Brian just mentioned 10 kilometres an hour in the CBD. I thought we'd regulated the speed to 30 kilometres an hour.
There's two areas on Tancred and Burnett Streets, right in the middle of the paved area that's being put for multiple use, that will more than likely be 10 k's. There's a red zoning each side of that area, and my understanding is that 10 will be put inside those.
We haven't done that in our speed limit review.
I know we haven't, and it's something that we will look to do going forward if it becomes the 10k. As I say, it's on the design documents. I haven't seen any other recourse to it anywhere.
We're not going to review again for 5 years, though, are we? Speed limits.
Under the new speed limit guidelines that are coming out from NZTA, you will have the ability as a council to change things virtually at will as you go forward.
Right, we go on to parking. That's bottom of page 86. Please try and stick to each section. I think the submitter, Mr. Argyle, had a point. Also, when we drive, even if we drive out of the council parking here, cars park tight up against the footpath. What's our policy, Brian? Do people send in a snap send and say, we'll write to the council and say vision is impaired by, do we take any notice to clear another parking spot for more visibility, or what's our actual policy?
We tend to look at each individual case as it's pointed out to us. If we feel that there is a concern that is genuine and we can accommodate it by moving the car parks, we will do so. In other areas, like for argument's sake at the tennis courts, we put in the hockey sticks to assist people to make certain as they weren't parking over driveways and that type of thing. So it's horses for courses, so to speak. It's just we will look at each individual situation and determine through our traffic engineers whether it's safe or otherwise.
Thank you. You'll most likely you'll be looking at these submissions. Councillor Lovett.
I'll go to the first of all with the parking one. If you're looking at that situation, could they you also look at Moore Street at the back of Briscoe's? There is an accident waiting to happen with that new gym there. The cars are packed right down that road, right through. I came out of there yesterday and you've got no vision coming out onto Moore Street looking to go right on there. But the other one with Alistair Argyle, I was looking at the Will Street. There's a lot of out-of-town trucks coming through there, using it as a shortcut. can we kind of narrow that intersection onto West Street or do something with that to stop the trucks going through there?
The heavy traffic, the Will Street one, my understanding, which side are we talking there? We're talking on this side of, yeah. So that one, I know that there is a problem. The only way we can influence it in any great measure is to go back to the trucking companies that we know are deliberately coming through that area. And again, we need the Snapstein solve to be able to do that. The second part of that, we could narrow the entranceway down. Whether that will stop them or not, I'm not 100% certain. I would imagine it won't. The other side is to try and push the heavy commercial vehicle police to monitor the area a bit more than they do, but they are very short-staffed, and we struggle with them throughout the whole of the town as far as that's concerned.
Mayor Brown?
Just could you put up a sign that said no heavy vehicles entering there, which like you have done at Rakai, which has worked?
Yes, that could be true, but then we would have to put them on a very large number of streets around Ashburton. Are you willing to stomach the cost of that, basically? It's the same with the engine braking. We could put the signs up for engine braking, which comes up later, but I'm confident that your truckies won't take any notice.
Assuming they won't, but just put the sign up on the one street that's been asked for, yes, which is Will Street. Not the whole lot, just the one that's causing the issue.
We could do that, but I guarantee that the next thing will be somebody will be looking at Cameron Street, and the next person will be looking at Walnut Avenue, and the next one will be looking at Queen's Drive, and then we'll carry on through.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Heavy traffic, can it use all our roads in this district or in this town, or are there restrictions?
If you look at our transport bylaw and look at the appendices A, B, C and D, you'll see just where heavy traffic can and can't go.
Councillor Cameron, turn yours off for a second.
Oh, beg your pardon.
I can have another question.
Yes.
So I'm driving a school bus. I wouldn't have a clue where to look. I just look in front of my window and I take the roads and drive. So there is no way of finding out, or do I have to really start reading that manual where I can get in or out as an heavy traffic driver?
Generally, we are not overly concerned about buses, unless it's the City Link bus or something of that nature. But it's the heavy stock trucks and things of that nature that we're more concerned about. And you'll notice that the appendices do restrict certain types of vehicles and down to a certain size. So it's I'm not sure who put it in the first instance, but that's where it is. I know that some of the roads at this stage are it's not feasible for to restrict according to the bylaw. For argument's sake, on McMurdo Street and Tynwald, down the far end, where you have the mainland freight depot. McMurdo Street in that area is not supposed to have any heavy trucks. I'm not sure how they get in and out of mainland freight if they can't use the road. So there's those sort of areas. We have the situation with the Tynwald Hotel and the motel situation there, where the truckies quite often frequent that particular motel. They're not supposed to be parking in McMurdo Street.
Councillor Cameron?
Can I talk about two things? The first thing is
We've got to talk on those two
Okay.
parking submissions.
Okay, parking. The first.
No, only those submissions. You can't go into parking
Yeah.
generally.
I'm talking about Alistair Argyle's thing. And when the mayor brought up, well, can we put a sign at the end of the road? You mentioned all the other roads that would also need signs. Clearly, we have a problem in this town where people live if all the trucks are trying to bypass the main road because it's slow, because we've got lights, as we've discussed, we have a problem. That's not acceptable for us to have that problem. So we have to deal in solutions. We can't just deal in identifying problems. So how much is a sign to go up? Like approximate $100?
Each sign would cost somewhere in the vicinity of $500 or $600, and then you've got the cost of actual installation.
We just can't have this where the trucks are braking and parking, and I mean, I know they go down Harrison Street and it shakes the whole jolly place up, and the paving at the corner of Harrison and, is it Allison? What's the first one? It's sort of softening and wiggling around and breaking up because of the heavy truck. I think we need to be a wee bit more proactive and not just say, oh yeah, well, we can't afford it, and move on. I think it's a blooming disgrace and we have to correct it. Personally.
Hopefully it's noted by the voting department. Yeah. Well, we've given them the message. Speed limits. Now, please only discuss the submissions. Don't go into speed limits generally.
I've got a question.
Oh, sorry. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Through the chair, so the Mount Somers made that request, and I think, did they make that request during the speed limit review? So what was the answer then? Was it wait and see? It is something that I think they really want it to happen, so.
Yes, but council agreed otherwise.
Did we? No?
I think we changed a lot of limits, especially on the Ashburton Gorge Road. It'll have a street name. We lowered that and internally, but we left Highway 72 or the Scenic Highway where it was.
Yeah, but I thought we were looking into that in the future. I didn't think it had totally been taken off the table, so.
From the point of view of the speed at this stage, it was to stay at 100. What we are looking at going forward is the intersections, the Patton Road intersection with Route 72,
yeah,
and the Tramway Road, Ashburton Gorge Road intersection as well. We will do that in conjunction with some rehabilitation work that we want to do in that area in year 2-3 of the LTP.
So that comes into, and sorry, Councillor Wilson, I'm kind of skipping, but the improvement request for specific roads, they've put submission in there as well about turning in. So that's what you're going to do, safe turning points instead of reducing the speed.
Not instead of reducing the speed. Council didn't reduce the speed, all right? So that is not part of the consideration at this stage. What is part of the consideration is how we deal with those two intersections.
Okay. I still think that we were, and the Mayor might have a view as well, but I'm sure that it was to stay on the table to see what we could do about that speed through ARG.
As I understood it.
Hang on.
Basically, going forward, as I mentioned just before, there is a new speed limit situation coming out, and it'll be left with more of the regional transport committees to deal with speed in this Canterbury region going forward. There'll be a 3-year reviews, but I think 5 years of myself is much more practical. But inside of that, you can make changes, I think, and just take them through the Regional Transport Committee. And once they're registered with the NZTA on their register, then it is the new speed limit.
Mr Mayor?
As I understood it, we didn't change the speed limit on the ARG there outside Mount Somers because we didn't consult on it at the time. So that was the reason, but it was to stay on the table and reduce it. And if you do the work on the entrance and exits from the village, that's fine too. But I think the main thing is to drop that speed limit. And I'm heartened by what you said before. We can change the speed limits at will when it comes. So when it becomes at will, we should be doing that one, because having been up there a few times, 100 kilometres past there is way too fast.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Yes, it does.
And we should be looking at doing that as soon as we can to lower it, and then do your improvements in conjunction or after that.
Improvement requested for Pacific roads. Bottom of page 87 and 88. Councillor Mackay.
Redcliffe Station submission, I hope that we're pursuing that with vigour. I see other people are trying to put the Aurora in and make it virtually impossible to proceed with that road sooner than later. I'm hoping we're doing all we can for that one.
Councillor McMillan.
And I was going to mention that Redcliffe Station submission as well, and I think I've been copied, and Councillor Wilson, Councillor Mackay maybe been copied into some emails about that, and now the concern is after they've had an emergency response meeting up there that they will need another road. So yes, I think we just need to support that one.
Councillor Lovett.
I was going to ask about the viaduct. What are we going to do there? Because obviously the signage with that, just the height, doesn't really mean anything to people. I'm wondering whether we're better to have a better signage there with like a camper van or a truck with a great big cross in it. It might register in people's brains that they can't go under there, because they often don't know how high their vehicle is, because they just look, often when you go past there you see idiots trying to go under it, and I'd actually like to see it closed off to all traffic. It's just a cycle and a walkway.
As part of the Tynwald signals situation, NZTA are proposing at this stage that becomes a one-way only situation, so you'd only come out from Malcolm Street onto the State Highway. That may prevent a lot of what's happening, though I know that some try to go under it from Malcolm Street and don't succeed. We've tried, there is a board that's away from the bridge, if you like, so that if you do try and go under the bridge, you hit the board first and you don't damage the bridge in any way, shape or form. So that provision has been made. It is well signposted in the sense of height and all the rest. As a driver, you're supposed to know the height of your vehicle. Yeah.
Yes, depends on your point of view whether you think it should be shut or not too. Depends where you live. Any further comment on specific roads mentioned there? If not State Highway 1, just remember that we have got limited say what actually occurs on State Highway 1. Any comments? Bottom of page 89, improvement requests for specific footpaths. Remember, we're just talking about the submissions. Those of you who will have read our transport plan has got specific footpaths to be upgraded in the next few years. Councillor Brahm.
Page 90 is part of it.
Page
90. Newman's.
No, we haven't got to lighting yet. We're still talking. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Question, Brian. So it looks like they're quite happy to pay for that paving in front of their business. When is the street rehabilitation? Okay. When is Will Street programmed in to get done? Excuse my voice.
Will Street is programmed within the next 2 to 3 years. We want to do the extensions of Havelock and Burnett, Tancred. We're looking at those three between William Street and Cass at this stage. We want to get those completed first if we can, and then we'll look seriously at Will Street at that point.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Footpath and curbing Charlesworth to Allens Road. It's in year 2 or 3. Can that please be brought to year 1? No one agrees with me. Okay.
No. I think Mr. Firth's got a comment.
As far as I'm concerned, we'll come to council with, as we go forward, these particular sites, and if you want one brought forward, we can do that.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. And on that same subject, I thought when we did the walking and cycling, was it, or the end of the roading speed limits, that we did move it from low priority up to at least medium. I think perhaps it could even become higher as the developments all happen in that area.
Councillor Mackay.
Road safety also for that stretch I mentioned before. If you're walking or cycling along that wee stretch there, it's very difficult to know actually where the road is. Most vehicles travelling towards Methven on that patch of road actually have to veer about 2 metres to the right to actually still stay on the road. So I think the line is quite difficult there if you're driving and there's a wide vehicle coming on the other side. I think it's a high priority.
Be noted. Street lighting and signage requests. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I've just got 2 comments or questions to make. So the sign for Mount Somers, and I was at the Citizen Association meeting where they discussed this at length before putting the submission in. Is this an easy fix to change the name? Apparently when you Google Mount Somers, it comes up with the mountain, and so a lot of people get lost. I don't quite understand it, but I also wondered, do we have a policy for adding the Maori name of the mountain into our road signage as well?
No policy that I'm aware of.
So you can do it?
Well, we can do it, but whether we will is another matter.
Okay. And is it an easy fix to change the name for the town and for the mountain? The signage.
If you're talking about Google, we don't have too much influence there, but we can certainly change the sign if that's what is required. If you want us to make it MT as opposed to MOUNT,
yep,
that's not a problem. We can do that.
Okay, thank you. I think that's what they would like. And the other one is regarding the dark sky. Did we, Tony, you might be able to answer this. We discussed this on Thursday last week.
Through the chair, yes, we did. And council was supportive of it. We're going to go away and understand exactly what's involved first. Come back to you.
No further comment on that section. Informal community feedback. Bottom of page 91, 92, 93. Hopefully the staff comments cover most of it. Councillor Mayor Brown.
Yeah, the first one there about those rapid numbers, it's being investigated. Probably they asked it was wrong, so emergency services can't find them, so it needs to be sooner rather than later, listening to the submitter in Hines.
No further comments? Right up to the edge of page 94. Tynwald Second Urban Bridge. Tony or Brian got comments?
So thank you, through the chair. What you'll see in the summary document on page 95, that's the update of where the current state of play is from Neil McCann. We don't have the detailed business case yet, and that will be coming back to council once we do have it. But this is where things are currently landing. So I guess the question is, right now, in terms of the LTP, we have it in the LTP, ensuring that we keep it in the LTP with your guidance, and just let the process continue is where we're at with this project.
Through Mr. Chairman, what we need is the business case to be completed and presented before council, and we've heard loud and clear the concerns around the second bridge, and not the need but the site. Until the business case is before council, it's very hard to consider the matter in any detail. In the end, we would expect the business case within the next 6 weeks, Brian?
You're talking about the business case as if it's the detailed business case finished final. It's not. We're doing a 3-stage process. Sure. We've gone through stage 1, we're up to stage 2. When they come back to us, it'll be presenting to council their decisions and findings up to that point. If once council has a look at that presentation and decides that they will continue along that line, that will go to NZTA. And if NZTA are reasonably comfortable with that situation, they'll come back with it ticked and approved. And at that point, we'll go into the 3rd stage, which will be a much more detailed investigation of the site that is preferred.
Understand. So could I, through you, Mr. Chairman, just seek clarification? The stage 2, when do you expect council to receive that? And will that be examining and coming to a conclusion of a preferred site?
The stage 2 should be with us within the next 4 weeks, I would hope. It has been delayed a little bit because of the NZTA projects that have been going on. But as far as I'm aware, it should be with you within 4 weeks. I think it will give you, rather than a definite answer or site, it will give you a choice of 2 or 3 sites, and you'll be asked to confirm what you would want to do from that point on.
Okay, so again, through you, Mr. Chairman, that report is obviously imminent, and until we get it, it's very hard for, I think, council to definitively consider the matter of the site or the choice around the site. What we have is received as a strong degree of community comment around one particular site in particular. And if indeed the stage 2 of the business case has either a preferred site or some choices to make, then council will be able to take that into account when it receives that report. But it's very difficult for us to take the matter much further until that report is received. So our advice would be to note the strong public opinion, but to defer any definitive decision around particularly the site until we receive stage 2 of the detailed business case.
Thanks, Mayor Brown?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll leave the second bridge debate there because it's, as you say, Hamish, quite rightly, we need more information before you can pick up on that. But looking at the submissions all the way through, there was 2 things that came up. One was 4-lane highway Christchurch to, Rolleston to Ashburton, and the other was a loop road around the town. Now, my understanding is to get these things on the table with NZTA, they need to start right here. So Brian, I think you have a 30-year plan for activity management, or what do you call that 30-year one?
Infrastructure strategy.
That's the one. So if we want a loop road, we don't need a loop road now, but we might need one in 30 years' time, or 20 years' time, or 40 years' time. But the time to start planning for that is right now. So we need to put into your plan, your infrastructure plan, if we want one, a loop road option, or start developing and putting it in. And then out of your plan, it'll come into our long-term plan, which then will feed into the NZTA plan, because they get their work streams coming out of our long-term plan. So lining it all up, we need to put a 4-lane highway in that infrastructure strategy, and also a loop road. That's the start of it. So not sure how you put that in, or just use your pen and put it in, but it needs to start.
I think a lot of people don't realise that we went back virtually to square one with the progressive fund money, and I've seen the original first stage. They looked at 24 sites that could possibly have a second bridge across the Ashburton River, and they've narrowed it down. The loop road will be in there as part of one of the options, so we have to wait until we get this, as Hamish and Brian have said, we get the consultants' report of what they consider the best, possibly 2 or 3 options. So understand that there's got every possible option, some that I've never thought of, they put in there as a possibility. So
yeah. So I wasn't talking about the bridge it's the loop road. It's planning for the future, 30 years out for a loop road, whether we need one or not, but we need to pop it in to a plan somewhere, highlighting the need maybe there with a route it may take. So when we get close to the time and need one, we've done the planning for it. And the same with a 4-lane highway. We need to put that in. It may not be a project, but it needs to go in. As I'm led to believe from the Regional Transport Committee, this is where it starts and feeds its way up.
Any comment from the learned people there?
There's a transportation thing that came out in the news this morning. It would be worthwhile council having a look at that. It's going where government's possibly going to go in the future. It's stating at this particular point that right across this particular document it says draft, not government policy. But it's an interesting document to have a look at. Basically, it is indicating that they don't really want to see any new roads put into or be funded. They're wanting to drop certain roads already that are on the planning. Part of this is to try and reduce the amount of cars, greenhouse gas emissions, etc., etc., etc. So by putting something like this up front, you might be going dead against where government and everybody else is trying to take us into the future.
Tony?
Thank you, through the chair. So certainly not to question anything that Brian has just said. I'm just looking at it from a purely, I jumped into the infrastructure strategy. The infrastructure strategy is often in more detail and often looking over that 10 years, but it does have a 30-year life, you're absolutely right. What we might be best to do if we were to put something like this in, if council directs us to do so, is a reference in a paragraph around in 30 years' time, these may be considerations, and then that could potentially just flow through. In 3 years' time, we won't know, there's a lot of things we won't know there are a lot of things that will be happening that we don't know right now, and then that at least is in the plan, can start flowing through. It may be taken out at that point. I'm reluctant to make it too much of a priority in the infrastructure strategy, because audit will want to see a whole lot of foundational information that justifies it and evidence, which would need to go away and do that work. But I suggest that we could, if you wanted us to, make reference in a paragraph at most.
Councillor Falloon?
Thank you. I just question why we have the second bridge even in the LTP. I take up a point that was made by the Auditor General that the chances of getting any further money of this are pretty close to zero, and we're going to be very lucky to get our 51% from Wakakatahi, with the pressures coming especially from the North Island for projects up there. It may be in plans somewhere, but to expect the ratepayers of Ashburton to front up with the missing 44% is a bridge too far.
Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the second urban bridges in Wakakatahi's plan. They fund our roading in a minimum of 51%. The comment that Audit made in relation to our plan is that Council stated policy is to pay 20%. If Wakakatahi put in 51%, the issue is the remaining 29%, and that while we hope or are optimistic that we can get additional support for that 29% without any concrete decision in support of that, then the Audit Office has some concerns that we are overly optimistic. But the 51% minimum from NZTA is in their plans. So if we take the second urban bridge out of the LTP, then Council has no capacity to contribute anything to it. So the risk of taking it out is that it'll readily then come out of Wakakatahi's plans, and there'll be zero funding towards a future bridge, which will make it significantly harder to get across the line regardless of site. So our strong recommendation would be that it needs to remain in our planning. We need to determine the site, taking into account the business case, knowing the community's perspective on that. And then we have an issue to secure the balance of the funding. And the balance of the funding can come from a number of different sources, but has not yet been determined. So our recommendation is it does need to stay in the plan.
Councillor McMillan.
And that leads on to my question. We've got 7.5 million in for the second, or our contribution in from year 4. Is that sufficient, or do we wait for this business case to then up it? I mean, there's no point decreasing it, but do we need to make it a little bit more to make sure we've got it in our LTP?
Within the LTP, there's 3 areas that I've put funding. I've put in a 5 million design area in year 1, 2 or 3. And then in years 5 and 6, there's provision for another 7.5 in each of those years, and that is for the actual construction of the bridge and associated roading. Generally, the design features are, if you're looking at a major project, you're looking at around 20% being how much it costs to do the initial upfront design, get things done, get things into that stage before going ahead. So that's why that 5 million is brought forward a couple of years. And so all up, there's the more that must be our contribution as well that you're talking about, rather than the totals, because I'm pretty certain that the total adds to somewhere in the vicinity of 35 million.
Through Mr. Chair, I'll just note that Council's current policy is to pay 20% of the bridge. Yeah. And Council's free to re-examine that policy and come to a different view if it needs to solve the funding gap itself, or it can remain with its current policy, and our search for the additional funding needs to solve the gap. But Council's current policy is 20%.
Councillor Mackay.
Mr. Chair, can I please agree with the Mayor on the ring road, loop road, whatever you call it, and keeping the pressure on for the 4-lane highway. Unfortunately, leaving the second bridge, or taking the second bridge out of the long-term plan, actually takes the foot off the accelerator of solving the State Highway 1 problem. And I think that while we've got it in there, it helps keep the foot on the accelerator to solve the State Highway 1 problem. Note I said it's a State Highway 1 problem.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. And I support the Mayor's conversation too around the long-term planning, because we need to be planning 30, 50 years out, and whatever solution we land at eventually with where the bridge goes, whether it's West Street, Chalmers Avenue, I see that as a 5 to 15 year problem solver. But going forward, you look at all the developments that are happening, people signalling and buying up land to divide and develop. This is only a short-term plan, and we definitely need to be looking out to that loop road in the long term. And we were told in one of the early meetings in the Tynwald Hall 10, 11 years ago that this was only a short-term solution and that there would be a requirement for a third bridge within 30 years. And as I said the other day, that's now down to 19 years.
Of course, there's going to be a revolution regarding transportation and cars. I see the government policy 2050 is no internal combustion engine cars allowed. Don't know about my little Morris, I'm not going to put an electric motor in it, I don't think. Councillor Brahm.
Well, you could use an e-bike, Mr. Chair. I can...
Sorry.
Are we there? Okay, thank you. It's a good idea, thinking 30 years ahead, but we need something now. We started about 15 years ago, we still don't have it. So we need that second bridge as soon as we can get. And what we do afterwards will be great, but we need a second bridge. It's not only completely full on the Tynwald side, the top side of this town is getting blocked as well. So we need some good options to get through this town. And one way is not right. We need at least 1, 2 or 3 ways to get to the other side.
Mayor Brown.
Yes, I just put in my diary that I'm going to go for a drive in your Murray in the year 2050, and I will bring the fuel. So if you could put that in your diary too, that will be a date.
If above ground by then, you'll be lucky.
But well, seriously, for the loop road and the 4-lane highway, if it doesn't fit in the 30-year infrastructure plan, Tony, fit it in wherever it belongs, and get it on the horizon. So I don't care where, just put it somewhere. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If my memory serves me correct, many years ago you could form special purpose authorities where you would borrow money for a particular project, like the Auckland Harbour Bridge, I think was one, Littleton Road Tunnel was one, and then you put a toll on it until it was paid off. Has that ever been looked at, or is that still possible? Does the law allow that? Does anybody know? Because that could be a way to find the extra bit of money for the bridge, wherever it goes.
Brian might know.
My understanding it is that it's indeed possible. You've got a highway out of Tauranga that is doing that currently. There's one north of Auckland that's doing exactly the same. You did have one in for the Littleton Tunnel when that was put in. There's no problem, and I dare say if it's going to be a state highway bridge, then it would have to be done through NZTA and getting tolling. If it was just a local bridge, it's up to council what they want to do.
No further comments. I think we've had a fair session on it, so the message has been passed through to the staff. If they're happy, were you happy with what we've discussed so far?
So just to confirm, the second bridge stays in the LTP as it currently is written, and some 30-year vision around transportation, particularly with regard to a ring road and a lane highway. I'll see what I can do.
The 4-lane highway is probably not 30 years away, but the loop road probably is, but the 4-lane highway will be sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Yep.
Waste reduction and recovery. 109 at the bottom of 109. We'll have lunch when we finish this, so. In other words, get on with it. Welcome, Craig. Councillor Mackay.
An agreement that we do the bins in town, whether it's Burnett Street, Havelock Street, Cass Street, Tancred Street. Quite happy to leave it up to staff to where they actually physically go, which square metre they occupy. But we need a rubbish and also a recycling in the CBD and at other spots in the town with high activities, such as, dare I say it, McDonald's or KFC or whatever. Stuff lying around the street's not an option.
Through the chair, yeah, just with regards to those CBD bins, they're part of the CBD revitalisation project, and they have arrived. We have them in town here, and they should be installed shortly, so to replace the bins that were removed.
I also see there was a request about a green or organic bin, and you've given an explanation that it is going to be there privately, or else possibly we look for it in the future.
Yeah, that is correct. Like I say, I'm actually expecting Envirowaste to start up their own commercial provided service around green waste or organic waste, because they're developing a big organic processing facility down in Timaru. So they'll be able to take it somewhere and have it processed. So that'll be purely privatised service. If that doesn't eventuate, then we'll definitely take a good look at it and then see what we can do in its place.
If I could just say, the CBD bins it'll start getting installed from this week. So you'll see a lot more bins out in town.
And a comment about zero waste. Are we progressing towards that? How are we going?
Yeah, it's definitely a constant challenge, because obviously, as an organisation, we're pretty much at the bottom of the cliff when it comes to the waste stream. We receive the waste. We don't necessarily control its creation or the packaging solutions that are comes through the markets and stuff, things like that. So, but we do everything we can to divert everything we can and work towards that goal. But it is an aspirational goal, and it's recognised by many councils around the country in that context.
Mayor Brown?
Yeah, just think about those bins you're going to put into the CBD. Whose responsibility is it to empty them while it's being still developed?
Yeah, so Envirowaste, they operate the litter bin truck, and they empty all of the litter bins in and around the district, in the towns and there. They've continued to do so all the way through that project, and then as soon as the new bins are installed, they'll pick those up.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. Can I speak on the Methven transfer station? That's okay. I'd still like to see this in year 4. I see there's quite a few submitters who are against it, but they're also the submitters that are saying that the town's growing and we need more infrastructure. So I think that we leave it in year 4, and I think it's 1.3. So that's doing all the concrete for the Methven.
Yeah, so it'll be a complete redevelopment of that site on the corner of Line Road and Methven Chertsey Road.
Yeah.
So there is the piece of land next door, which is like a bare section at the moment that's being grazed, but that's all part of a piece of land that's designated as a waste facility and was put aside for the future of Methven for growth in that. So we would do all our planning and design to get everything we need on that site. To continue to accept recycling, and then also to be able to compact and transport landfill waste directly to Cape Valley rather than having it come into Ashburton and then out again.
Okay, thank you. And what will happen with the green waste? So Vaughan's Road will finish up soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you gave us approval to go ahead and develop that site, we would take green waste there rather than Vaughan's Road.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Falloon.
Thank you. Just picking up on Forest and Bird submission on page 209 about legacy landfills. Does council have any record of legacy landfills, particularly those likes of river mouth villages and that sort of thing, and what is being done about them?
Yeah, we definitely know about the ones we know about, so to speak, that we've been involved with historically, and that there will be private sites in that we don't know about, and I guess that's the unknown that most people are concerned about. But certainly there are 5 closed landfills that I'm currently managing at the moment, and there's only one that would fall into that concern around climate change, and that's our Ashburton landfill here in town. Councillor
Ronson.
Thank you. I noticed we had a submitter commented on the reduction of bins in Barring Square, which I presume will get sorted with the CBD, but also the cemetery and the domain. Do you have a comment to make on that?
The open space areas are actually managed by the Open Spaces team. I do believe they have been removing bins. They want to encourage people to take their rubbish home with them, which is a concept that I support. I think everybody's got wheelie bins at home, and they can put their rubbish in there. The purpose of litter bins is really for your visitors and people who come into town and have nowhere to put their rubbish. But in terms of their future direction with that, I guess the manager of Open Spaces could answer that best, more than me.
Okay.
No further comments? Thank you very much, councillors. We've achieved quite a lot in remarkably short time.
Very good.
So I'll declare this adjourned till 1 o'clock.